remind everybody, please like, share, subscribe, send the super chats in if you have questions for either debater. Consider becoming a channel member. Got to get the shameless plugs out of the way. Also, we are going to be taking callers at the end of this debate if we have time. So the mods are going to be perpetually putting the Discord link in the chat. It's also in the link, the description of the video. There's a Discord link. Join that. Get vetted by the mods. You can get a stream link. Come on stream and ask your questions directly to either debater if you want. So we are just letting you know we are taking callers.
All right.
And like I said, we're going to get 7 minutes on the clock for Dylan to go first.
This is going to go well. Okay, I think now I can...
Sure, I don't think I'm going to be using all 7 minutes, but
I think now we can
I just want to say that having...
Now we can go
globalism versus...
like 125, right? Okay. Let's go.
Get vetted by the mods. You can get a stream link. Come on stream and ask your questions directly to either debater if you want. So we are just letting you know we are taking callers. And like I said, we're going to get 7 minutes on the clock for Dylan to go first. Whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Sure, I don't think I'm going to be using all 7 minutes, but
yeah, I'm going to be using 50 minutes.
I just want to say that having a debate about globalism versus nationalism is always, it feels strange to me because I view...
My favorite topic, because you could say that the natural state of the world is quote-unquote globalism, because people went from place to place. The way technology was shared was through people from one country traveling somewhere else and trading. Like, if we had restricted borders and isolated country, we would not be even where we are today technologically, right? China would not spread its technology. Like the golden age of Islam, things would not spread around the world either, right? I actually contacted Dylan on, I contacted Dylan on, what do you call it? I contacted Dylan on Twitter. I sent him a DM. Okay. So if he answers, we might arrange a talk about Poland, Ukraine, etc. Zen Shapiro? What the heck is that?
View globalism kind of like the waves on a beach or on any coastline or like the ocean. It is an unstoppable force of nature that has been here before I was on this earth and will be here long before I'm dead, no matter how many structures I build or create to try to fight against it, whether through just completely trying to isolate my country or however I behave. In this case, it would be like putting a sandcastle on the ocean shore. Nation states are actually quite, as in we view modern nationalism as an extension of, is a very recent creation. Globalism.
Yeah, it's a very recent creation, like 19th century. It started in Europe in the 19th century, nationalism as we know it today, nations as we know it today, nation states as we know it today. Before it was like really a big mix of peoples living all over the place. The word nation used to mean something totally different, right? Like, oh god, this debate is so bad, 5 crucible blows. Oh, I see, interesting. So, nations, the word nation used to basically mean people living in a given country, right? So there was not this notion of people living in a single like piece of land, having like this shared national identity. Before, there was no such notion.
Existed way.
So Dylan is actually totally correct when he says that nationalism, nation states and nations like are very new, and what we could consider globalism existed much longer.
Before nation states,
history.
And there's a chance that it might exist way after nation states.
Yeah.
So I doubt nobody is really going to say they don't want any form of globalism or globalization. Nobody.
I'm really glad to hear that Dylan acknowledges that nation states are not really a thing that need exist forever, right? I'm glad that he sort of acknowledges it, like I think that's a plus on him.
He's going to say the Silk Road was wrong, the Chinese hurt the world by introducing everybody to these new products and spices and silk. Nobody's going to say that. So I assume this conversation is not going to be we shouldn't have globalism at all. It's going to extend into the level of globalization and the level of globalism we should accept as a society. And personally, I'm a huge fan of international trade. I believe international trade brings peace, it brings prosperity, it allows us to be more productive, have access to more resources, and allows us to have access to technology and sciences that otherwise we wouldn't. Where in the ancient world, the idea of being able to transfer this information and bring these technologies halfway across the globe to industrialize the world, that's completely preposterous. But due to
and I think the less we structure around the nations, national borders, national identity, then the better we will end up in the long run. Like the more, like I think that nationality, quote unquote, should be a matter of self-ID almost. Like if you want to be American, then you just move to America. If you want to be Polish, you just move to Poland. If you want to be Japanese, Brazilian, etc., right? It should be like, we should have maximum freedom of movement, in my opinion.
to international trade, due to the international markets, due to globalism, we have been able to revolutionize science and tech and trade and what resources we have access to. I also have seen globalization as a great way to spread ideas. And through that spreading of ideas, we've seen more and more countries pick up ideas like democracy, liberal
Exactly. The wild thing is nationalism wants monarchies back, but nationalism is a loyalty to a nation, while living under a monarch requires loyalty to the sovereign family. True. Like nationalism and nation states were actually a thing that came about as a defiance to monarchies, you know. So this is like this right-wing nationalist yearning for monarchy is a really bizarre, contradictory mix. Essentially, you were loyal to your lord, and that lord was loyal to the sovereign. Yeah, basically, you're right about that. That is how it worked. And the rise of nations, like, I think, you know, when we talk about the birth of the idea, we oftentimes look towards the French Revolution, right? That it's all about the nation. But the French Revolution was in direct opposition to the monarchy, to the idea of monarchy. So this whole thing, when people who are nationalists also want monarchies back, it's a really bizarre mix. Especially if you take into account the history of how these things have formed.
Democracy, the ideas of 1776, if I could say as an American, which I'm very happy about. I love the free trade of information between states. Even it's just that I love the fact that I can go online and argue with people halfway across the world. Peacekeeping efforts and organizations like the United Nations and that interconnectedness we have through international orgs, trade, economic blocks, or kind of political economic blocks like the European Union have created the most peaceful time in human history. While it is true we still have wars in the modern era, generally speaking, we have seen a downward trend of violence between nation states, in large part due to the interconnection of those nation states.
I will definitely agree that having a European Union is better than having a group of fractured countries, like separated, isolated countries that sort of are in a tension against each other all the time, that exploded into 2 world wars, basically.
Up until the Russian invasion in Ukraine, this has been the most peaceful time in European history ever, which used to be known as a continent covered in blood and violence and genocide.
And keep in mind, Russia is not part of the European Union. So in a way, Russia invading Ukraine is not even a thing that that's not even a thing that contradicts Dylan's point in any way. If anything, it bolsters it, because if Ukraine was a part of the European Union, then there would be no way that Russia would just so recklessly invade Ukraine.
Globalism has never committed a genocide because fundamentally it is not a genocidal ideology, where nationalism has sadly in places like Myanmar right now or Ethiopia.
Of course, I could argue against that a little bit, right? Like globalism itself is not a thing that can do things, right? Globalism is more like an idea of interconnectedness, but the powers that belong to a global sort of system do individually still commit genocides. Even when a country is a part of a more united global system, that country can and does still commit genocides, like the US committed genocides, right? And some other countries did still committed genocides. Like China is part of the globalized system and still is committing a genocide right now, right? Happy New Year, boy. Happy New Year, boy. Hello, come on. Yeah, does that make sense, what I'm saying to you right now? What I'm explaining to you? Do you think I'm being sensible? Or do you think I'm just being a big bad duck that does not understand the feelings of how it all happens? You know? I'm on a roll, I think. I'm on a big roll. And this is how it happens. Okay? Alright. We continue with the video.
Or say different conflicts in, for example, Iraq, and what the Saddam government did to the Kurds has committed many genocides. That's not to say that there's no downsides to globalism whatsoever, but I find this idea of like nationalism will be held up as a block to stop globalism the same way I view a sandcastle trying to stand up against the ocean. It's just inevitable that it fails.
I would agree with Dylan here. And I would argue that it's good that nation states are inevitably going to move aside to a more united global thing, right?
And the real question should be, what's the level of globalization you want to accept for your state, and how do we deal with the effects of globalization when it comes to like social programs and the loss of jobs in the Rust Belt that will be rebuilt through immigrants and others making new businesses and trying to do job training for those people. So I'm interested to see exactly where the debate becomes, because globalism, fundamentally, we're going to have to live with it whether we like it or not.
True. I agree with Dylan. Dylan has been wise here. I feel like division of labor, industrialization of the world has led to drafts being so damaging that war is avoided. Especially countries with tech sectors, right? Actually, there's an interesting thing about industrialization, and not even industrialization. There's an interesting history of the fact that right-wingers speak a lot about the traditional family, the traditional role of the woman in the family, that woman is at home, but many people don't understand or know that historically a woman in the family was actually a very heavy physical labor worker. Like women used to work on the field, women used to sew clothing in the home, used to brew alcohol. The biggest brewers of alcohol were women, and women would also manufacture many items at home. And with the rise of factories, with the rise of places that would the rise of factories would take those things, the rise of breweries, etc., would take those things away from the home and to those specialized places. And that would lead to the denigration of the role of the woman and how a woman's role was perceived in society. And this is like a little bit of a historic moment, right? History moment from me. History of women moment.
Okay, thank you for that opening statement. I did mute your mic there at the end, Joker, just because there was some typing going on in the background, but we're all good now. So thank you for the opening statement, Dylan. Joker Society, you got 7 minutes on the clock whenever you're ready.
Yeah, global.
And also the loyalty of a nation led to the creation of such concepts as minority, majority. Like, keep in mind, before the rise of the nation states in countries, there were no such terms as a minority, you know? There were just people living in a given country, since there was no national identity in countries. There was no such thing as a national majority and national minorities that would live in a given countries, you know? Such terms were not used. Things were not conceptualized like this before the rise of the nation state, right?
Globalism, what a funny meme indeed. Dylan, you claim it is an unstoppable tide. Well, I would look at it more as an unstoppable cancer. Well, unstoppable is a questionable term. It is ultimately a cancer, and I believe globalism has failed us in so many ways. And
so, according to this person, before the 19th century, we lived in like this cancerous world, right? Is this what this person is claiming? Before the 19th century, the world was just cancerous. That's right, Tyler Jones. During agricultural economies, women would tend to cattle such as milk, eggs. They would turn textiles into clothes. They would produce butter. They would actually work as they would actually work in instead of like animals in the field as well, like they would carry and they would also pull the things that plow the field, right? They would plow the field. And of course, women were the biggest alcohol brewers. Well, yeah.
furthermore, nationalism has been on the rise since the globalism is what makes it be on the rise, because the nationalism is a healthy response to globalism going wrong and people being different.
This is just an empty slogan that nationalism is a healthy response to globalism going wrong. What does it even mean? A healthy response to globalism being wrong. What do we mean by globalism going wrong? And what do we even mean by healthy response? Like, this is such an empty slogan that there's not much to even say here. Like, is he gonna, I'm really hoping that he's gonna at least explain the terms, explain what he means by that. Because Dylan made a pretty pretty sound case, and this is just empty slogans all around.
Franchised by these globalist ideals that they do not want. They do not want everything to become like America. They do not want everything to look the same.
Globalism is when everything becomes like America, and globalism is when everything is the same. Keep in mind, before of the rise of the nation states, borders were not controlled in the way that they are controlled now. The strict control of the border is also something that was created during the rise of the nation state. So people moved a lot more freely before the rise of the nation state, and yet everything was not the same everywhere because local cultures formed and there were differences in those cultures, you know? And of course, that's always going to happen. We always are going to have local differences. We're always going to have some sort of like, diverse cultures all around the globe. everything's not just gonna become the same.
What I view as globalism is
So this is not really a sound claim to make.
when I go to France, everything looks the same. If I go to Sweden, everything looks the same. And ultimately,
This is not, if you think that Sweden and France all look the same, like, yeah, of course, Vietnam, Japan, Korea, China, uh, Italy, they all look the same, right? Like, global is when everything looks the same and everything is like America. Like, this is nonsense. This is nonsense.
globalism destroys cultural diversity and national sovereignty, in my opinion.
Cultural diversity has nothing to do with national sovereignty. Cultural diversity precedes national sovereignty. In fact, nationalism stifles culture. Nationalism stifles growth of culture, okay? This is my opinion. So this is like a nonsensical argument. Diverse cultures existed before nation states. Diversity between countries existed before nation states. So this is a non sequitur and a nonsensical argument, all in all.
And it might be true that it is unstoppable, as in, if we define the term of globalism as in conversations between countries, which I don't believe could be defined that way. Globalism
Also, countries are not organisms. Countries cannot talk with one another, okay? What do you mean conversations with countries? So that's another nonsensical claim. Like, countries are not organisms, nations are not organisms, they do not talk to one another. Before the rise of the nation states, all sorts of different peoples live all over the place. It was a mixture of many different peoples. So this weird framing it as countries talking to one another is nonsensical.
is a much more deep term, in my opinion. It is not simply trade between countries or diplomacy between countries. I view globalism as a superposing thing that opposes a country.
Yeah, globalism means free movement of people, like before the rise of the nation states, when people wanted to, for example, find work. So they just moved to a different country because there were more opportunities for them in a different country, and that was okay, right? People were not tied to a sense of national identity.
So, especially in Europe, okay, I don't know about Dylan, maybe
And yeah, especially in Europe, that's right. Especially in Europe that happened.
Dylan wants a homogenized society where, you know, every country looks the same. He spoke about American ideas.
Again, that did not happen. That did not happen in Europe before the rise of the nation state. We did not have homogenized European society. Everything was not the same. Even though Germans lived all over Europe, what we know as French people lived all over Europe, people moved all around Europe, it was okay. In fact, the United States of America is supposedly one nation state, but it is very diverse. Everything's not identical even within one country of USA. The USA is one country and it is very diverse. Everything's not identical within the US. Yeah, before nations' borders were so thin that village into different countries would trade between each other without the monarch needing to get involved, and that benefited Europe as a whole. Yeah, of course. Of course that happened.
Being propagated through globalism is a good thing. Who is the arbitrator of such ideals? Why should everybody fall in line to the American
Nobody is arbitrator of such ideals. That is what makes those ideals great. That there is no arbitrator. That it just means free movement.
morality, American truth, and such things? What Dylan asked, he was one.
Also, I really have to repeat this once more. Globalism is not when America. What do you mean American morality? That's nonsense.
Wondering where the debate would take us. So
I'm not sure why the argument about America. America has nothing to do with it. Globalism existed before America did. As Dylan has explained, it was not the same type of globalism that we have now, but it still was a type.
I would like to discuss the impact on cultural diversity that globalism has. I would like to discuss corporations that rise through globalism. In my opinion, globalism is essentially the final evolution form of imperialism. So what we see as modern globalism is a wing of Western ideals imposing on the rest of the world, is what I think. And
Well, that is, of course, nonsensical, because that would mean that the final state of imperialism happened between the 19th century before the rise of the nation states. That's like nonsense, right? That makes no sense.
on the topic of national sentiment growing each year, I think it's a healthy response to overarching globalist policies that people just do not agree with, especially in Europe. We see this lately in Italy. We have a nationalistic government elected. We see this in Brexit. We see this in populism rising. It's clear that people.
Also, let's be clear. In Italy, it's not a nationalistic government. It's a pretty fascistic government. Let's make that distinction clear. I do know that nationalism does often lead to fascism because it's pretty intrinsic to many of the ideas of nationalism. But let's be frank here. Italy has chosen a very, very fascistic government.
People do not wish to be told what to do. People.
It has like the ruling party has a living relative of Mussolini in it. The party loves Mussolini.
Want to govern themselves, and I think people are just fed up with globalism. I think globalism a failed system. If we're talking, Dylan was talking about UN. What has UN really prevented? I don't really see. I just see UN as a failed organization. And I'm sure we're gonna get into Ukraine because I don't know. Dylan likes to pretend that he's Ukrainian, I guess. So we're gonna get into that. So
Dylan likes to pretend that he's Ukrainian. I'm not sure what this job is supposed to mean. But the UN is preventing Poland from being attacked, if anything.
as Ukraine, the Ukrainian conflict is clearly driven by Ukrainian nationalism. It is not driven by globalism from America. It is not driven by globalism from Europe. The brave people of Ukraine defending themselves, they have their national identity and future in their hearts. That is why they do it. Right? And in the words of Zelensky himself, the United Nations Security Council is a failed structure. They failed in preventing Russia from advancing. It was the nationalism of Ukraine and rest of Europe, because the Europe countries are nationalistic, afraid of Russia's advances, so therefore they have stepped in to help. So I struggle to see how globalistic structures are actually useful in the modern world. It's just a detriment to me.
I would counter this by saying that, for example, Poland and Ukraine have become very close over this conflict, and that many people are saying, many people are returning to talking how we used to form a single country, that nationalism is not our heritage, then being a country of many nations is our heritage. So as you can see, it's not as simple, right? Like some people say that we are seeing the rebirth of the Commonwealth of the two nations before our own eyes.
Alright, you finished there?
But I very much wonder how Dylan will speak about this element. Because it's true that there is a lot to be said about the national identity of Ukraine, right? Being a factor in a very fervent defense against the Russian invader.
You finished with your open?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you guys for that. Before we get into it, people in the chat are begging to know, Joker, what is your accent? Like, what's your nationality or ethnicity?
I don't want to dox myself, but I am
Very little nationalism being shown right now.
I am from a northern European country that is exceptional in its nationalism. It is taught to us, so that's why I'm so excited for this debate, because it is taught into our hearts since early ages that a nationalist society. I would define my country as a civic nationalist country. I'm more of a cultural nationalist myself, but national.
Do you think this person is Swedish? Do you think this person is from... Do you think Joker Society is from Sweden? I think I am placing my bets. I'm gonna say Joker Society is from Sweden. What do you think? Place your bets as I try to reset position on my avatar. Resetting. Position. Like northern country, very nationalistic, really makes me think that it's Swedish, but you know, you never know, right? Like that makes me think Sweden. Like I would be so surprised if he was like, it'd be such a shock if he'd say, "Oh yeah, I'm from Norway." I'd be like, "What? No, you're, no way, he's from Norway. Like, no way."
Nationalism is a very interesting idea.
I would
here.
not believe that.
It is not an evil thing, as Western propaganda would like to say. I think nationalism is a force for good.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, thank you guys for those openers. I do want to remind everybody we are taking...
Also, I've never heard a Western propaganda, quote unquote, that says that nationalism is bad. I have not heard that Western propaganda before.
Callers tonight. So at the end of the debate, get in the Discord, get the stream link. You can call in and ask either debater a question directly. And obviously, we're always taking super chat questions.
Citation needed.
As you see fit. All that being said, we're going to get into the open floor, gentlemen. Hour and a half is on the clock.
So I think it seems like we're going to avoid the economic argument, because the economic argument for globalization
So where do you think he's from, Tyler?
is easy. It makes societies more productive. You have access to more resources. It seems that you want to avoid that, but I just want to make sure, like off the bat, we're going to get a concession that, like, economically, the globalist argument is very easy, because globalization has raised human society to the highest level in human history through interconnected trade, technological.
Actually, a type of globalization even made it possible for technology to develop to the level that it did. Like, many inventions from China had to spread throughout the world. Many discoveries during the golden age of Islam had to also spread all over. Like, those things had to spread somehow. And if the borders were just closed, then that would be, especially in the past, a much more difficult affair.
Research programs, all of these issues have brought us to a level of human development that the founding fathers would have gawked at in its amazement.
No, actually, I would like to ask you, why do you think that globalism is international trade? International trade existed before there was a global understanding of governments.
Yeah, but the international... Ooh, he's walking into a trap. I really hope that Dylan is gonna activate the trap card and say, you're right. But global trade existed before nation states, before a tight control of the border. Right? No, if you're looking for that, I don't think you're gonna hear that today, Boy Meets Me, because this is a discussion, globalism versus nationalism, right? Like, Dylan's point is not even that Dylan's point is not about capitalism advancing our society, Boy Meets Mini. It's about globalism advancing our society. And keep in mind, globalism can exist without capitalism. Globalism and capitalism are not the same thing. The freedom of movement, the freedom of trade, etc. All those things can exist without capitalism. Like, those things existed before capitalism, people moving freely through borders and trading things, etc. Right? So it's not really an argument about capitalism advancing our society. It's about globalism advancing our society. Does that make sense? So I don't think we're gonna hear any pro or anti-capitalism arguments today. Because it's a bit outside of the scope of the discussion. But I am really hoping that Dylan will push a bit here and say, yeah, international trade existed before nation states did, before the control on the borders was not as tight as it became during the formation of the nation states. I'm really hoping to hear that argument, especially since Dylan has made this argument during his opening speech. So he only just needs to repeat it now. And we are like at home. So let's see what he let's see what he says. Let's see what he states. Also, this is a great time for me to ask every single one of you to maybe become a Patreon. What do you think? Would you like to become a Is this? Yeah. This is it. Patreon. So consider becoming a Patreon. Yeah, nice boy. Super boy. Okay. And now we return to our scheduled programming of discussing this. So I'm really hoping to hear this argument from Dylan. Like, I have high hopes. We will see in a moment. You can even place your bets in the chat.
Globalism, that is international trade is a part of globalism because it is part of the world's interconnectedness and being together and acting as a global world.
Yeah,
like the Silk Road was part of globalism, as is NAFTA or the TPP or
back in the day when there were two countries neighboring each other.
The other thing would be, for example, the anti-globalist take to a trade deal would be, we need to protect.
Wait, what did he say? Sorry.
A level of human development that the founding fathers would have balked at.
Let's listen to this again. I didn't quite catch
No,
up.
actually, I would like to ask you, why do you think that globalism is international trade? International trade existed before there was a global understanding of governments.
Globalism, that is International trade is a part of globalism because it is part of the world interconnectedness and being together and acting as a global world. Like the Silk Road was part of globalism, as is NAFTA or the TPP or any
back in
trade
the
agreement.
day when there were
Because
two countries
because in
neighboring each
comparison,
other.
the other thing would be, for example, the anti-globalist take to a trade deal would
I'm
be
not sure. If you heard what he said, can you write it in the chat? I'm not sure why. I'm not sure I understand what he said there.
we need to protect our workers. We don't want to have foreign workers doing these jobs instead, so we're not going to accept this trade deal. That would be the isolationist or maybe nationalist reaction to something like the TPP, NAFTA, or something like that, where the globalist take would be, we should increase trade, we should increase this interconnectedness, because interconnecting our ideas and interconnecting our economies and our technologies and our research programs, these are beneficial for everybody, which is the argument of most economists.
All right.
Well, countries are inherently narcissistic, and I don't think two countries.
What does that mean? Countries are inherently narcissistic. Once again, countries are not living beings. Countries are not organisms. Countries cannot be narcissistic. That makes no sense. Countries cannot be... What? What does that mean for a country to be narcissistic? That's an empty statement. There's nothing to respond to here. Let's move on.
Is agreeing on a beneficial deal is globalism. I think
It is.
globalism. Well,
Just like,
globalism.
definitionally, it is. That's why I said it's
Alright.
like an unstoppable force of nature.
No, what I see
Like,
is
how... Does this person think that a country is like an organism that can have wants and desires and be narcissistic?
globalism is few countries deciding other countries what they should do.
Well, that's
I don't think.
No, that is not globalism. No.
not.
I don't think
the
two
definition
countries.
of globalism.
I don't. I don't. Okay, that's a cool
Is there
definition.
any definition you can pull from that would be globalism is one country tells another country what to do? Like,
But that's factually what we
Then
think of when we
cite
see
me-
globalism.
cite
That
me
is
the
fact.
No. I'm not sure what you think. Countries aren't narcissistic. The people who run and enable nationalist fascist movements are. True. Exactly. Exactly, boy. Like, globalism is when one country tells another country what to do. And that is a factual what we think when we say the word. Like, wait a minute. Like, maybe, like, okay, let's be fair to Joker. Globalism. Let's be fair to Joker. Maybe there's a definition that fascists personify their nations often like motherland or fatherland. It's people being its lifeblood. They try to apply human prosperities to their functions. Like, this is actually a funny thing, Tyler, because in Polish at least, the term motherland actually referred to your place of birth, which actually existed, the term motherland existed before the notion of the nation state, because people just moved around from place to place and they felt more tied to a place, to a community, to like their place of birth maybe, than to a national identity, right? Like, think about it. For many people, for many Jewish people, for many, like the Kingdom of Poland, let's even isolate it. The Kingdom of Poland was the motherland for many Jewish people, for many Germans, for many, like, probably Tatars, for many Polish people as well. But do you understand what I'm saying? Like, the word birthplaces was not really tied to a nation either. It just referred to the literal place where someone was born. The birthplace. Globalism, the operation or planning of economic and foreign policy on a global basis. What does globalism mean in simple terms? Globalism, a national policy of treating the whole world as a proper sphere for political influence. Compare imperialism, internationalism. Examples include the movement of religions or the diffusion of scientific knowledge. In the past, social globalism has often followed military and economic globalism. So I would say that there is no definition here that claims that globalism is when one country tells another what to do. So I guess we can move on from that point. Dylan is pretty correct.
What you think of.
I
That's
don't
not
I don't
what
really care about the
historians or
Oxford definition. I care what is happening
your
in the real
made
world.
up definition.
All right, and what is happening in the real
Is there
world
any
is that
historian
globalism
that would use that definition?
It's that globalism is used as a tool for the world powers to dictate. Well, actually, the Westerners, they are dictating for the world what to do. And
Actually, the biggest, like a huge amount of imperialism happened under nation states. So that's not really an argument. A nation state, because can declare its nation to be the best. A nation state can declare the nation to be the most deserving and then just conquer and tell a different nation what to do, right? It happened historically. So let's not even go into that argument. Fascists personified their nations often like motherland, right? We've talked about this.
I do not agree with you that two countries agreeing on a trade deal is globalism.
Well, then you just don't know what globalism is. That is globalism. Definitionally, it's globalism. There's no historian of any respect.
If two nationals,
you gotta let me respond. There is no historian or expert in international relations that would tell you globalism is when one country tells another country what to do.
Also, keep in mind, in the past, this guy be like, but dictator Joseph or Stalin, Hitler, Biden Jr. In the past, globalism, trade, like international trade in the past, especially the further into the past you go, was not made by countries as like organizations, right? It was done by traders moving around and sharing things from different countries, like moving like merchants that traveled from country to country and shared technology, technique, discoveries from like the different parts of the globe. It wasn't country X as an organization doing business with country Y as an organization and then having relations. It was merchants from all over the world walking around, sharing stuff with other people, right? And it created those sort of like, do you know what I mean? It led to a spread of ideas, technology, and many techniques, you know? So, like, there was this, like, a lot of that going on. Like, it's the further into the past you go, the more, like, mercantile capitalism gets complicated because it actually did have, like, the power of the imperialist powers behind it to facilitate it. And what I mean is, like, merchants just traveling from place to place without imperialism following in its footstep, you know?
Globalism is many
without companies that were formed during the imperialist colonialism time, you know? That was a bit different, right? like the way that companies were created by following in the footstep of colonialism is different from the way that in the past merchants would travel from country to country, spreading technology, goods, and techniques of doing certain things, etc. It was a bit of a different thing.
Things including economic trade deal. Like, for example, the TPP was a globalist trade deal. Everybody called it a globalist trade deal. Why? Because it tried to interconnect the American economy more with Asian economies, which would have raised productivity in Asia, allowed our markets to intertwine themselves, which promotes not only peace and prosperity, but allows us to have more influence in Asia. That is globalism. The Silk Road was global. This is just globalism. Like, you can say that's the okay aspect of globalism. I'm fine with that, but that is globalism. Definitionally, it's globalism.
All right, so can we move along from the actual things that are happening in the world?
So
instead
if we
of,
both acknowledge that
definitions?
economically,
Wait, is this person saying that economy is not actually happening in the world? We live in a void. Economy just exists in theory. It affects nobody. Economy affects no one. Okay. Like, this person is only about empty slogans and nothing more. Like, I'm gonna be honest, if Dylan is willing to talk to people like this, then I feel like I'm deserving of Dylan's time, okay? If Dylan is willing to speak to a person like this. Like, maybe this is my little moment of arrogance, but I'm pretty sure that, yeah, this person doesn't understand trade blocks and just wants to be justified for being racist. True. This is so strange. Press quackers in chat if you think I am worth to have a nice discussion with Dylan Burns. Quackers in chat.
globalism is good and is beneficial for states to intertwine their economies. And
Not
trade
necessarily
and
always.
Well, not in
necessarily
every.
always.
I'm not saying every trade deal is the perfect trade deal, but the more intertwined the world has become, the more productive, scientifically innovative, and all these positive things we like to
Not necessarily always is like a thought terminating non-response.
see, like going to the moon. It has improved.
Oh, the moon. But listen, we obviously know what we're here to debate. We're not debating.
Listen, the moon landing was obviously fake. Okay, don't try to like pull wool over our eyes with that fake moon landing BS. Okay, Dylan Burns, we all know that the moon landing is a hoax. Let's continue debating for what we are actually here to debate. Okay, you moon landing faker, socialist, communist. Let's go.
Well, no, you can't say we obviously know, because the debate offered made to me was globalism versus nationalism. My opening addressed that it's kind of a silly debate, because on its face, globalism is an unstoppable tide. If you want to just say we don't want to talk about economics today, that's fine. We can avoid the economics discussion, and we can talk about like the UN and stuff like that more specifically. But economically, globalism has been nothing but a force for innovation, growth, and prosperity.
True. If you're gonna try to like, I don't know, there is no way to say that nationalism and isolationism would bring upon greater economical, like, in any aspect. Like, you cannot argue for that. The world is just becoming smaller and smaller, and that is a good thing.
I still don't like. I think you're being disingenuous.
What's the economic argument for nationalism over globalism then?
True.
Well,
Yeah,
because
that's good. We're just gonna hear another empty slogan. Wait for it.
a nationalistic country in a trade deal serves its own interests first, instead of a collective.
All countries will try to serve their own interests on the international stage when engaging in trade deals. But engaging in trade deals and allowing your country to be open up to these markets, that is globalism. There can be nationalists that engage in globalism. For example, Ho Chi Minh was a nationalist, hardcore nationalist, but he was also a communist who believed in like the global communist idea. He was also in a way a globalist. The way he traded was in a globalist way. This is also why I think nationalism is a lot of times silly, but like you can be a globalist and a nationalist.
Yes. Wow. Because like Dylan Burns is really doing great. Like he said a really interesting thing here that nationalism can be oftentimes silly because because of this contradiction. For example, there is this big historical figure in Poland. He was called Józef Piłsudski, and he considered himself a inheritor of the heritage of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, but he was also a Polish nationalist. So he envisioned a multinational Poland, and he was a Polish nationalist. So there was this huge contradiction in his ideology, that at the same time he wanted a Poland of many nations living together, but he was also a Polish nationalist. There's a very ridiculous contradiction in his ideology. And Dylan Burns is doing a pretty good job pointing this sort of contradictions out.
I mean, I think the nationalism is a little silly, but you can, as Ho Chi Minh did, as many other people did.
Okay,
Fidel
for the
Castro.
sake of the
Right.
debate, obviously we both know what we talk about when we talk about globalism. We don't talk about two countries neighboring each other making a trade deal. We're talking about
Yes,
a global system
of economic trade as well. Like trade,
Yeah.
like China, for example, that many people
Exactly.
like, point to as, oh, this is more nationalist power. They are
Like you cannot simply fold your arms and say this international trade does not count as globalism. That international trade does not count as globalism.
very globalist when you see their trade deals they're setting up in Africa.
Like, you
and the New
cannot
Silk
say
Road
that.
And all this other stuff. That is globalism through and through. And they're doing it because they know it would benefit their country as well as the world in the long run for us to be all economically more interconnected. That doesn't mean every single trade deal is the best trade deal in the world and we should do every trade deal. But like the more interconnected our world will become, the more peaceful it will become because it'll be harder to fight wars against each other, and the more prosperous it will become.
I disagree on that.
And keep in mind, globalism is not just about trade on like state-to-state level. It's also about the freedom of people to move from country to country. It makes it easier for people to permanently live in a different country, right? Like the European Union idea of borders that are open, like the Schengen, and like the whole, thing where you can go from one country of the European Union and permanently live somewhere else, right? Doing away with border patrols, with visas, etc. This is also part of globalism. That is really, really good.
That part. What does this have to do with the definition of globalism?
What does trade have to do with the definition of globalism?
No. What does your claim of everything's going to get peaceful? Or
The world has slowly gotten more peaceful over time as economies and nation states have become more
Yeah, it is undeniable that the formation of the European Union have sort of caused, well, countries in Europe not to war as much anymore. Like, I mean, this is undeniable.
interconnected, and globalism, like through organizations like the UN, offering third-party mediators like the UN offers and peacekeepers, has been successful. Not in every instance, but in many.
Like, you cannot deny that. The first conflict that we have in Europe is by a country that is outside of the European Union to another country that is outside of the European Union.
Instances higher than it was before, been more successful in stopping the spread of civil wars, stopping the spread of conflict, and mediating the end of conflict. For example, since the end of the Cold War, the UN has done 16 UN peacekeeping missions and civil wars across the world. 11 of those, they successfully finished their mandate, and those nations have not broken out into more war. That is the success of the UN. Like in the Ivory Coast, where they disarmed, I think it was like 70,000 extremists who were going to use those guns to murder people through peace agreements that they did in the Ivory Coast. Not to mention the institutions they built and the aid they delivered that saved countless lives. That isn't to say the UN's perfect. They engaged in some horrible behavior in places like Haiti before.
Yeah, Dylan is doing great here. Really nice debate, right? Really nice. Nice job. I am really happy with how this is. I'm really happy with this, how this is going thus far. Like, this person has nothing. Like, Dylan might as well be talking to a wall, to be honest. Like, this person gave zero arguments so far, empty statements. It's nothing. Like, this might as well just be a lecture to the audience by Dylan Burns, to be honest, this debate. I mean, isn't the EU directly responsible for keeping Greece from collapsing, which would have likely resulted in civil war and fascism in the year? Yeah. Like, might as well be a lecture by Dylan to the audiences. Because this person so far has said, this person has said nothing thus far. Nothing has been said by this person, nothing of substance anyway, not a thing. It's a healthy response. Nationalism is a healthy response to globalism. Like, that means nothing. You know? Nothing.
But the UN was very clearly, and I'm not the only person who believes this, I can cite you studies if you want from like Princeton and other universities, showing that the UN being involved in conflict decreases the amount of casualties, helps refugees, helps displaced people, and decreases the odds of a war breaking out, or re-breaking out after they mediate a resolution. I think the UN, the biggest problem with the UN is the Security Council, which we both seem to have a problem with, and the fact that it doesn't have enough power and enough funding.
Oh no! It needs to get less. It needs to be abolished. I do enjoy the Western's planning. Thank you very much about that.
I don't know if I offended you in some way. I'm very sorry, I guess.
Oh no, it's fine. You Westerners been doing it for 100 years. It's okay.
Well, maybe you still have more to learn.
No, they really trying. Globalists are really trying to make me think ways that I don't want to think.
I mean, but will you acknowledge that UN peacekeeping missions have been successful in mediating ends of the conflict and stopping civil?
What northern country has been ever, like, I don't know, what country are you from, you Westerners? What country is he from? Now I'm really curious.
Wars and stopping the civil wars from spreading in the majority of cases and where they've gotten involved. 11 out of 16.
I would not. No,
I mean, just statistically, it's true. 11 versus 16. Just statistically, that's true, right?
Like, that is a bigger number. Thank you.
Well, no. Okay, no.
I keep in my boy meets Mini. This is also how the Polish government speaks. The Polish government also speaks about the evils of the West. So it really makes me. Belarus? No, I doubt it. Belarus is not a northern country. Belarus is like a fairly eastern country. So if it was Belarus, then it would not be a northern country.
Understand. 16 civil wars. They helped bring an end to 11 of them. That's a pretty good ratio.
And also keep in mind that Belarus has had like a real awakening when it comes to the wish for freedom. So a lot of Belarusian people are just against Lukashenko and all that stuff, and they had a countrywide protest, a strike, and they have been crushed under the heel of their dictator. This is why a lot of Belarusian people do sabotage when it comes to Russian forces, and Ukrainian people and many of us feel solidarity with Belarus that is being oppressed by Russia and its Belarusian dictator. Like, we should talk about Belarus more, about how people there have really fought for freedom but were crushed under the heel of the dictatorship.
Considering also the UN is only
So Norway, Finland, or Swedish, because it was Russian, I would think you would be proudly nationalist. Interesting.
getting involved in the worst cases. They're not getting involved when one neighbor shoots another. It's when there's genocide and just the worst the atrocities of man. That's when they get involved. And considering the conditions, I think they've been generally successful. In the places where they weren't as successful, like Yugoslavia, it was due to a lack of authority. They had to intervene during genocides at Srebrenica.
Well, they really dropped the ball in Rwanda in 94.
Yes, because they didn't have enough power and they weren't there. They didn't stay present. That's my argument. We need to have these institutions have more power so they can act. Well, I mean, you could say that about cops, where cops didn't act. And you would say, see, that's why we shouldn't have police, is because in this instance they didn't act. No, the police should have acted in that instance. And maybe if they had authority to act in that instance, that could have been stopped. Same thing is true about the UN.
Wait, you're for cops? You want more governance? You want more...
What happened to his... I guess we're not going to super agree on the cop thing, but what happened to this camera? I think we'll now. I think after Ukraine wins its total freedom, it's time to support Belarus next. You know, we should support Belarus next, if anything. That is my opinion.
Or militarization.
If there's something stopping a cop from stopping a murder, I do think that should be removed as long as it doesn't violate everyone's civil liberties. What civil liberties would have been violated by the UN getting more involved in stopping what was going on in Rwanda? It could have only saved lives.
Who's deciding for UN what's right and wrong?
I mean, probably a UN Council vote combined with maybe a Security Council vote. But I have a problem with Security Council. My camera keeps going out. It might just have to stay like that.
That's all right.
Oh, that's
That's
quite
okay.
sad. I would love to see your face. It's quite a square image.
Okay.
Ha ha ha, oh my god, what a joke. I love your face, it's quite a square image, oh ho ho ho. Funny comedian indeed. Funny jokes ensue.
It's quite distracting, if I'm honest.
Many men think my face is distracting.
If it's distracting, then why are you saying that you want to... Are you saying... Okay.
Not if you catfish people. Anyways,
What? What? Oh. Cat? Let's move on.
yeah, I mean...
But do
think
you acknowledge
this
the
is
majority
your
of things-
season, what?
Do you acknowledge that the majority of these interventions have been successful to that capacity? Like, I'm just 11 out of the 16. Like that's a high.
Yeah, Dylan moved on. You're not good at jokes. Just stop.
Success rate considering the conditions they're working in. Most people concentrate on Mogadishu or other instances like that where they fail because of course that gets more press.
Actually, I do feel strange when he's not on camera. I actually like it more when he's like on camera. You can see the gesticulations and you can see the... I actually think it's nicer when you see Dylan on the camera than when you just see the flashing logo. But that's just me, I guess.
Gets more attention to them disarming rebels because that's how the press operates. The press is not completely honest when they cover these and the amount they cover one instance over another instance. I assume probably you're an anti-establishment guy. You would also have the similar problem with the press.
That is true. I acknowledge that 11 is more than half. 11 divided by 16 is more than half. So these conflicts have all been in a similar scale, if you could help me.
Some of them vary in scale. The things that make it, when it's on a larger scale, it's going to be more difficult because, again, the UN, a big part of it is because the UN security, a lot of people think the UN is like a big money machine that sucks up all the funds of the world. When you compare the amount of money...
No, I would think it's a useless machine that imposes
if you
their
underfund
will on other
something,
countries.
it's not going to be that effective. But considering the lack of funding they've gotten and that they've been successful in 11 out of 16 of these interventions, I think that shows even with the like skin and bones that we give them, the just the scraps off the plate, they've still been effective. That shows they're actually a lot more cost effective than say direct military intervention that we've engaged in say Afghanistan or Iraq.
Iraq ended up in genocide, so I would say anything is better than Iraq. Like, I would say that's no contest. Iraq was when was the genocide. So not the proudest moment in the U.S. history. And we're probably gonna go into that in the future, because I'm preparing some materials on that, but that's content for the future. Dylan is a Lantern John chat, and I think this dude is a queerphobe. He's uncomfortable Dylan jabbing him with a silly flirting language. Yeah, didn't the UN denounce US intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan? Yeah, especially in Iraq, like it can be called a genocide against the people in Iraq, you know? So a certain streamer, YouTuber said that I would never say that it was a genocide, but I will repeat it once again, that Iraq was 100% genocide. And we will do a deeper dive into that topic in the future. Not today, but we will do it.
Again, I do acknowledge that 11 divided by 16 is a bigger number than 50%.
So why are you saying it's useless?
You're not.
If you're acknowledging
you're
that
not
it's been effective.
quantitizing the scale of these conflicts.
I've given you
so
one,
they
for
solved.
example, Ivory
They
Coast.
solved 11 easy ones, and then they dropped 5 hard ones. Like, what does that tell me?
Well, that
Doesn't tell me
tells you
anything.
that they've worked. Even if you say it's 11 easy ones, the conflict in the Ivory Coast wasn't quote unquote easy. Like the conflicts that they've dealt with, like I've said before, they're dealing with these conflicts when it gets to the worst state. What I think the UN should be involved in is more preventative action, but they do usually respond.
True. Preventative action is actually really important. That is correct. That is correct.
Of action where the genocide starts and then they get involved, not the genocide's beginning to start and then they get involved, but it starts and they get involved. They're getting involved in the worst situations possible.
Yeah.
And they got a batting ratio out of
And
11.
this is, by the way, why we should be talking about the trans genocide more, because we want to prevent. We don't want to get in there when the genocide starts. We want to prevent it. Exactly. That is a good argument. Usually those all of those genocide prevention discussions bleed into one another, I've noticed. The arguments about Iraq, the arguments about this or that, they often use the same language, and we can use it to bring us back to topics like the trans genocide, because they are, at the end of the day, there are similar arguments employed.
11 out of 16. I think it's pretty good. Now, for the ones that he didn't succeed in, I don't think the answer is, wow, I guess we should get rid of the UN or dismember the interventions and stop all of this because we didn't win all of them. I think that's the wrong response. The response should be, how do we improve either funding or how the Security Council operates or how the UN operates to try to have a better batting ratio going forward. You don't throw your head in the air, you throw your hands in the air and say,
Of course, we have to remember that operation of organizations such as the UN is really hampered when you are dealing with nuclear powers that are gonna say, you want to look into us? If you're gonna look into us, then we're just gonna nuke you, like Russia, right? It's really difficult to do preventative measures against Russia when it just starts threatening to nuke everyone. Let's keep that in mind as well.
quit because you didn't stop every single
It's
genocide
not that easy in many cases,
or every single civil war.
because nuclear arsenal is at play in some cases when it comes to international affairs.
Would it be crazy if I said to you that I don't want UN to exist at all?
Yeah, I think it would be crazy and also probably like not achievable. So it's like something we can like talk about, but it's also like practically it's not achievable.
Why?
You would have to get like all the nations to like either vote to abolish the UN, the majority of them, including everyone on the Security Council, which is going to be difficult considering those on the Security Council like the influence the Security Council gives them over world affairs.
Right.
Most of the vast majority of nations recognize that the UN is useful in not only getting their views out onto the world stage.
Like the UN is like one of the bodies that keep places like Poland safe from Russia, even if Russia is not doing so well in the war right now. Especially if Russia should get stronger, a UN is a strong deterrent for Russia not to just invade Poland.
But also as an intermediary when it comes to conflicts and a neutral ground where they can meet and talk and discuss issues. And nations actually fight to get recognized by the UN, not to get out of the UN.
Yeah. Since, of course, Poland does share a bit of a border with Russia.
I think you would have to have such a massive shift. Even the most hardcore nationalists in the world, like the ones elected in Italy.
Who is the main sponsor of the UN? Who pays the most?
The United States pays the most, but not enough.
Would you say United States, the UN represents the United States wishes in the globalist stage?
I think the United Nations represents the interests of all nations, some more than others, because it depends on like influence peddling you do in any organization. But China, for example, its reaction to the United States large, quote unquote large, we actually fund the UN very little amount of money in comparison to what we should be doing.
So if something doesn't work, we're gonna put. If something
it does
doesn't work,
like we already discussed, it does work. Stop
more.
saying it doesn't work when we've already cleared that it does work. It has stopped civil wars. It has removed guns out of the hands of terrorists. It has worked. It's just when we talk about Mogadishu and other instances like that.
Like, Joker Society should really try to substantiate anything he says, because he just says it doesn't work and just, there you go. That's that. It's just a monarch of the empty statements that don't mean anything. It just doesn't mean anything to just say it doesn't work. You have to substantiate what you're saying. You can't just throw out an empty statement and, there we go.
More coverage because that's more fiery. And all the instances that I know of where they failed to work or they failed to succeed, the majority of the problems came from them not having enough authority, like in Yugoslavia where they just sat by and did nothing, or Rwanda where they fled.
So you want more authority?
Yes,
for the
that is what I'm telling you. I think we need to be more globalist when it comes to the UN. Absolutely. Did you know that the contribution we give to the United Nations as the United States, it sounds so massive, it's 1/4 of the police budget of New York City. It is not that much money.
It needs to be less.
So we can have more civil wars break out, more instability globally.
Why
more
can't countries sort out their own shit? Why do they need America to be the World Cup?
Because
This is ridiculous, of course. One moment, my mom called me. I will have to call her back. Okay, I'm back. Mom called. Which is why, it's because he presupposes his worldview is everyone's worldview, so he doesn't feel like he needs to explain. He just assumes you agree with his position, which is why he's talking in little sound bites and not really holding a position. True. What does that even mean? Why can countries, quote unquote, sort their shit? It's not just about civil wars. It's things like Russia just being able to invade Poland. Would that be good?
When economies are able to develop, and number one, more consumers in countries that are falling apart, we would like them to be
useful for who? Globalist corporations.
It's useful for everyone, because if I'm a manufacturer in the United States or a manufacturer anywhere, I would like people to buy the things I manufacture, so I don't.
If you're a manufacturer
that's not even
in the
only
US,
reason.
you want to move your production into
conflicts.
a third world country and exploit it and drain it and ruin it.
You can say exploit it, but those investments lead to these countries becoming wealthy.
Are you a big corporation guy?
You gotta
big corporations?
You gotta. They raise their standards.
You've been talking so much. Why would I let you finish?
I gotta cut in here for a second there.
Are you saying that nationalists are anti-corporationalists? That's not true. That's not true at all.
Has been a good amount of crosstalk. I would ask Dylan to just be a little bit charitable based on the language barrier, But also, Joker, I implore you to try to get your points out quicker and more concisely if you want to prevent Dylan from interrupting. But it happens. Crosstalk occurs. I get it. But let's just try to control that. Let's go to Joker with the point he was making, and then we'll go right back to Dylan. Go ahead, Joker.
Yeah, so I'll give it back to Dylan.
Dylan's back.
Thank you.
Okay, so when you say these countries are being exploited, the biggest, like these countries, while it is true, I think our relationship when it comes to the TPP, for example, that would have raised the standard of labor standards in Asia. The Trans-Pacific Partnership would have, absolutely. And now that the United States is not involved in it and nationalists won the conversation, now those labor requirements have been dropped. And now those people are going to be living in worse labor conditions because the United States said, oh, let's throw our hands in the air. I don't like this for whatever reason. You can talk about the problems unions had with it, but most of those problems were answered. And so when we talk about, oh, we're exploiting the third world, I do think a lot of these corporations do exploit the third world. Absolutely. I think even the vast majority of them do. But that doesn't change the fact that these investments do lead to a rise in the standard of living for the people in these countries. That's why the Chinese, who are communist countries, supposed to go by the values of communism, allowed so many American companies to come to China and exploit its people. But what did that lead to? China is now more prosperous economically than it's been in a very long time.
Again, you are conflating things. Just because China has grown in size at the same time as American corporations have entered, it does simply not mean that is the cause of it.
You do not think that the businesses coming to...
Wait, hold on. This person is a communist? But... Wait, is this person a socialist or a communist? Because communism is an international project, like proletarians of the world unite. What? Is this person a pro-China communist? I don't get it. What? Now I'm confused. Like, am I misunderstanding something? Did Dylan just imply that this person is like a pro-China, pro-communism person? How can you be anti-globalism if communism is an international project? Like literally, proletarians of the world unite. What's happening here? Communism is one of the most globalist projects ever. Oh, tomfoolery is here.
China and hiring workers led to the massive drops in poverty that we've seen in China. What do you think was the real contributor?
In a way, I would say the development of Chinese infrastructure is what caused the living conditions.
Who invested in the infrastructure?
Chinese themselves.
It was just the Chinese themselves. So they made the factories. They did it all. Really? No, they didn't. A lot of the foreign.
What do you think? McDonald's made the factories?
McDonald's made their buildings. The McDonald's, yes, they actually had to get local farms and do these things. Yes, they absolutely. We'll get to McDonald's. I'm fine with the Golden Arches, but I like, yes, American investment.
I hate them personally. I see them everywhere.
Well, okay. Businesses invested in China. They invested in infrastructure, and that investment turned out to be extremely beneficial for the Chinese. There's a reason why the Chinese wanted that American investment. And it was useful. And it wasn't just American investment. It was European investment as well. It was investment from all around the world. And it was very useful in dragging millions upon millions of Chinese people out of poverty, because globalization and trade is useful for not only fighting against poverty, but also fighting against, like I talked about earlier, I didn't get to this, but fighting against conflict and war. The more interconnected you are with your neighbors, either in organizations like the European Union or economically, the least likely you're going to invade them and have to fight a war with them, because you don't want to lose access to the resources, and you don't want the international backlash that's going to happen to your economy through sanctions and other repercussions. That is happening, for example, to Russia right now, and to other countries who have tried to break out of the mold, and it has done nothing but led to them feeling negative repercussions of that, even if sometimes that's delayed. For example, the American invasion of Afghanistan. If you ask most Americans today,
okay, are we having a discussion or a monologue here?
Monologue. Let's not continue.
I would like to have a
to be fair,
discussion.
Dylan, you do have to let him respond. Let's
not said much so far.
Shapiro here. He says I should wait for you, but you just don't give me any pause. So what am I supposed to do? Should I just be rude? Or so, Dylan, on record, you support globalist multicultural companies to come in drain a country of its resources simply by the fact that, oh well, it maybe that benefits the country. So Nike, slave labor is perfectly fine as long as it grows the GDP of China.
Was that a response to me? Because I never said that slave labor is good. I said foreign investment was beneficial to
This
China.
is what happens when these globalist companies.
That's why I was in favor of
rampant.
things like the TPP that put labor protections in place.
Great, and how did that work out?
I mean, isn't this like saying, like Dylan Burns could just turn it around and say that nationalism led to Europe-wide ethnic cleansings in the 20th century, right? Like, it's,
It fell through because of nationalists like you.
True.
So now the child labor is still there.
Yeah, well, maybe we need to abolish these companies instead of blaming nationalists for.
Are you a communist?
oh, interesting.
No, I would like to say more of a totalitarian, but.
Okay, well, I don't think the solution is just
Okay,
abolishing all the
totalitarian.
companies. I think that if the government tried to do that right now,
Yeah,
that
but
would lead to
totalitarian nationalist countries usually just set out and conquered other countries and treated them as lesser. That is usually what the nationalist totalitarian projects had led to.
old economic chaos, millions of people losing their jobs, and I don't think the government has the employees or the ability to replace all these gigantic companies who have specialized staff, training, and they know how to run the operation. Not to mention, a lot of these are like for-profit companies that the country just has no business running. Like, I do not believe the government should be running like a television company that produces TV shows or produces TVs.
That is such an awkward example.
With any people who make TVs,
it worked really fine in Russia. They
It
removed all of American countries and just companies and just filled in with Russian
and it's
properties
been
and
an
workers.
absolute disaster for their economy. We've seen in Russia, from these sanctions and all these companies leaving, they've lost what, like 500 to 800,000 people who have fled because their jobs went away or they didn't want to get drafted. There was I think an 80 to 90% decrease in people.
Things are
buying
not going well in
automobiles,
Russia.
and the automobile industry completely caved
Russia
down.
is not the best example to give. That's really...
Their inability to import foreign parts has crippled their aerospace programs, and certainly their airlines, which have grounded over 40% of their flights. We've seen a reduction in GDP. They just don't have the resources or technological know-how or the infrastructure in place to replace all the companies that have fled or all the things they can no longer access. It's been a disaster for them.
That's great. So you're underlining the bullying of globalists.
Well,
sanctions.
It's not bullying when they invaded them. They invaded another country, and then the world and a lot of the nations they trade with, the Europeans, were scared
Wait,
of that.
is he saying that Russia is being bullied by the world? Russia is being bullied by the world because it invaded another country? Yeah, Joker is getting like Batman. Joker is being slammed. Damn.
Latvia, Lithuania, they see that Russia invaded a country using a justification they could easily.
Joker is not doing so well. Joker is going back to Arkham. What do you think, Tom?
Another country, and then the world and a lot of the nations that trade with the Europeans were scared of that. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they see that Russia invaded a country using a justification they could easily apply to them when it comes to, like, these are artificial states created by the Soviet Union. They reacted as you would expect them to react, saying we no longer want to subsidize your war effort and buy products that are going to be used or sell you products that are going to be used to kill Ukrainians, like the high-tech stuff that they put in missiles, which they can no longer access. The Russian tech industry has been caved out. I think it's like a 60% reduction in the tech industry in Russia. It's absolutely a 60% reduction in GDP.
Well.
The war has been nothing but negative for the Russian economy.
And has Russia exploded, or are they doing fine?
They're doing very bad.
They're not doing fine. Russia's not doing fine. That's a statement. That's a pretty strong statement to make, to claim that Russia is just doing fine. My gosh.
Russian.
So why are they just chugging along?
They're not. What do you mean just chugging along?
Whoa. I don't think countries should just be wanting to chug along. But maybe that's just me. It would help if Joker had a single point to make and knew what he was actually debating this dude about. This dude is about political experience as a graper. Russia's just Chugging along. Okay. All right.
If somebody told me tomorrow that
It's been a year since everybody told Russia's gonna explode.
nobody said Russia's gonna explode.
But it's-
Nobody, like the people at the start of this invasion, people were saying like the opposite. Russia is much bigger than Ukraine. People were expecting like Ukraine to be in trouble, be in big trouble. When the invasion happened, Poland freaked out. Polish people started emptying their accounts in a hurry, like in a rush, because a lot of Polish people just assumed that Russia would roll over Ukraine and then attack Poland, even though Poland is in the UN. Like, nobody said that Russia is gonna explode. Nobody has been saying that, as far as I know anyway. Maybe...
It seems they're just
What does that even
becoming
mean?
more stronger and stronger.
It's not. It's becoming weaker and weaker. It's supposed to be the second most powerful country on the planet, and they can't take a city of 20,000 people in Bakhmut. Right? They are not becoming stronger and stronger.
This is
actively becoming.
This is a
weaker.
bit of cope to say that Russia is getting stronger and stronger. There's a bit of coping with things here. Okay, it's a bit silly.
And weaker as their military
Yes, it's
capabilities is caved
because
out.
the globalists are pumping in resources.
Yeah,
into
because
Ukraine.
globalism is an unstoppable tide. Like I said, they should just give up. Exactly.
No, because the UN is a tool for United States, and the United States
the
is
UN have
fighting
to
a
do with
proxy
this?
war.
The UN has done
The
nothing to
Europe-
stop this war, or have been involved
Yeah, the UN did not start it. What?
in the war really at all.
Europe, which
Besides
is under the
sanctions.
boot of US. Europe and US is pumping resources into Ukraine
Did you just say that you're from a Northern European country?
because US is fighting a proxy war with Russia through Ukraine.
You say that they're under the boot of the U.S., but if you ask the Poles or the Estonians or the Latvians or the Lithuanians, they voted to be part of NATO. In fact, they didn't vote to be part of NATO. I'm going to say it in the rudest way possible. Their governments got on their hands and knees and begged to be part of NATO because they knew that an American and European defensive shield would protect them once the Russians woke up again and said, hey, time to be Russian. And they started invading their neighbors again, which they did in Georgia, Chechnya, and now in Ukraine. Like, globalism has been...
Poland is afraid, even when part of the UN, Poland is still afraid that that Russia might attack. Keep in mind, right? Like Poland is always very, very afraid of a possible invasion from Russia. Poland is oftentimes very worried.
Now
about
and
beneficial
now
for Eastern
everybody is criticizing Europe since it's what I like to call the Soviet European Union, which is
Wow.
oppressing its constituents and telling member countries to what to do. And the anti-EU sentiment has been the highest it's ever been. And I don't think that's going to
You can
stop.
talk about Brexit if you want, because people could be anti-EU or their sentiment can raise against the EU. That doesn't mean the EU is necessarily good or bad for you. People can be wrong about things, right? There's been many things that the majority of
Exactly.
people
No,
have been
the
wrong
EU
about.
is necessarily bad for countries that want to make their own decisions.
So why is it that there's so many countries like Turkey and Ukraine that are fighting so desperately be in the EU? In Ukraine, you could say, well, access to the markets.
Because
other
they are
people.
bribed.
And even if the Polish government is crying, posturing about being anti-European Union, it still wants to remain. Most Polish people also are pro-European Union.
Because they are bribed by the
Bribed.
higher GDP countries like
They're
France and
Turkey is bribed.
Germany. Yes, because they're going to get resources.
But it's
from
France
these
and Germany that
countries
is
to survive.
France and Germany are the countries actively stopping Turkey from joining the European Union, yet they're being bribed by the German and the French to join the EU.
They want the money. Obviously, they want the resources. Obviously,
So
France
why
and
don't
Germany
they bring them
doesn't wanna
in?
Give them.
No, they
Because
don't.
they don't want to give them the money.
They don't want
Because
them in the
Turkey's not a
EU.
strategic point,
No, the reason they keep getting
because
stopped
Turkey's
is because of
poor.
their issues with, free press, democracy, and human rights. This is the main reason cited by these governments. The European Union would love
Yeah,
to
and
have
you're going to
access
help
to...
my.
If Poland was not in the EU today, it would have big problems in joining the EU. Poland would not be able to join the EU today, as it is today.
Point
economy.
here.
Yes,
exactly.
so exactly that Turkey is being influenced by the fact that they could have access to better economics, globalized economics, to be more protective of the press and more favorable towards democracy, which I think are good things, and I think
No.
it's fine.
I feel like no one but Greece was forced to join the EU, and Greece joined to stay a country because it was falling apart because it was in a debt loop. Yeah, and also Poland like was really fighting hard to get into the EU. I remember that.
For organizations to promote those values.
No, Turkey is forced to adopt Westerner moral ideals.
They're not. What do you
for a
mean
monetary
forced?
gain.
What does that mean? Okay, I'm sorry. When you
What
say
do you-
forced,
okay, what do you think
gonna
is a-
happen?
what a
What's going to
bribe
happen if
is?
Turkey
What is a
doesn't join?
bribe?
Wait, no. Even a bribe isn't forcing anyone. If I came up to you and give you $5,000, I didn't force you to do anything if you take the money. But again,
True. What do you mean? That's nonsense.
aren't being bribed to join the European Union. They are.
That is
being,
literally the
wait, no.
definition of a bribe.
Okay,
You're
so
forcing somebody to do something.
we're not
because they're
forcing
down
them.
bad.
How are we forcing them? By offering economic prosperity and trade. If that's forcing, then every trade deal is at gunpoint through economic coercion. That's how trade, that's how capitalism, that's how human exchange works. That's the basis of economies.
Okay, Dylan, listen. If you go up to a hobo and you flash $100 note and you tell him, do a funny dance and I'll give it to you, is that forcing somebody to dance, or is that...
No, you're not forcing him to
It's
dance.
more like coercing, I guess.
It's still up to his free will, yes. And by the way,
it's not
Turkey is not a homeless
abusive to
person.
take.
I don't think, let's also not say that Turkey is a homeless person, this pitiful fucking like backwards country who needs
True.
the EU to save them. They are free
No,
to join the
my
European Union
example-
if they meet the trade standards.
It's a bit of a weird example comparing Turkey to a hobo, but yeah.
Of joining the EU, which they haven't, so they haven't been able
And
to
the-
join
and
it,
the
which is
cultural
completely they're free to not join
standards,
or
which you
not.
forgot about.
Well, yes, if you join the European community, they have certain standards when it comes to visa-free travel. Because if Europeans have visa-free travel access to Turkey and then they get arrested for doing good reporting, that's a problem for these European countries when Turkey has a problem with the press. I think it's absolutely fine to enforce standards that doesn't lead to people using that visa-free travel to get arrested because they told the truth about the Turkish government and their oppression of Kurds or any other issues they have.
Yeah.
Okay, Dylan, what is
For
coercion?
the Armenian genocide, where we read it.
What is coercion? If you're going to say it's coercion, I just don't care even if it is. Because every trade deal could be then considered coercion.
So you're an imperialist.
If believing in trade
you don't
makes me an
care- you don't
imperialist,
care
then
if
sure,
somebody-
but that's such a weak definition of imperial.
Joker Society misses an opportunity to deploy the Coconut Island. Well, not everyone's Vosh, okay? Not everyone's Vosh. Imagine you're on an island. Coconut Island.
No, you have your own moral standards and you're willing to impose them on others. That's
To join the
imperialism.
agreements and deals that we're a part of, yes. If somebody wanted to join America, right, like become a state, do you think it would be crazy for us to say, well, if you want to join America, you have to follow American laws, you have to follow American values because this is our country? Or would that be evil imperialism for Americans to say you would have to follow American laws to join America? If you want to join the European Union, nobody's holding a gun to Turkey's head saying join the European Union. Turkey's a very powerful country with a lot of influence. They want to join the European Union
Turkey is pretty strong.
because they want the economic benefits. It's up to them if they're willing to make the compromises necessary to join the European Union of their own free will.
Okay, let's say let's say Canada joins the United States, and in 10 years the United States shifts their moral standards and what they ask of their neighbors, and so they're gonna suddenly decide that let's say we're gonna put on sanctions for your anti-LGBTQ laws. Okay, so
Yeah,
isn't that coercion? You're gonna
that's a good thing. Like, it's human rights violations. Like, are you saying that any nation state should be able to oppress its citizens? That's horrible. It's pretty bad.
impose your will on the states, or should states have a free right to choose how to govern themselves?
Like when you say states, do you mean nation states or American states?
Well, we're talking about America here.
Okay, well,
Canada would be a state in this scenario.
If Canada decided to break federal law and start violating what is federal law when it comes to, say, gay marriage or stuff like that, then I do think there should be penalties for violating the law and order, baby. Like, I mean, yeah, if you break the
Law and
law, you get
order.
penalized. I don't know. Yeah, government is inherently coercive. If you're a totalitarian, you should know that.
Well, what I'm
Laws are
getting
inherently
at here
coercive.
is
Are you against laws? Are you an anarchist?
Uh-oh.
partly. What I'm getting at
Wait,
here.
you said you're a totalitarian anarchist.
Totalitarian anarchist? Oh my gosh.
Okay.
How does that work? No,
Pivot
can
harder,
you-
please.
Wait, no, I'm not
Pivot
pivoting. It's
harder.
just that earlier you said you were totalitarian. Now you're saying you're an anarchist. What's a totalitarian anarchist look like? Fantastic. So you want the government to have a ton of authority, but also, never mind, don't have all the authority. It should be with the people and an individual
we,
level. Fantastic.
Can we go along with the point that I was can we not?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Pivot, thank you.
It's not even a pivot. You said both of those things in this conversation.
That's great. We can talk about me in the after show all you want. Can we discuss globalism and
Sure, I'm
nationalism?
happy to discuss
Well,
globalism and nationalism.
I'm gonna step in here again. I think
That's true, Brina. But I don't think it applies to the situation between Turkey and the EU.
part of why it appears that Dylan may be steamrolling the conversation, or you could say pivoting. I'm not making a judgment on that.
Okay.
I think what you need to do, Joker, is you actually need to assert
Make a point.
what you are defending when it comes to nationalism and make an argument for why that's actually favorable to the globalist state that that Dylan wants here. I think
Zen, if he
the
wants,
burden
Zen,
is on you to
If
actually
you
make
want,
an
I
argument.
can we can do like they do in boxing, and we can have like a few minute times out, so like a coach can come in and like give some advice if we want to do that.
Maybe we'll
But,
make
like,
it faster
If
because
you want to do that, is that we can do that if you want.
Well, I do want to give Joker the floor here to just argue what you mean when you say nationalism is better than globalism, and you know.
because this is getting a bit incoherent. So maybe we should just watch it at faster speeds.
Actually make the argument for that. That way you're not kind of constantly on the back foot from Dylan.
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly.
So I believe that the world is better run when it's run by nationalistic happy governments that cooperate with each other instead of a overarching superpository above country organization.
So what do you think should be done about genocide? Let's say Myanmar starts genociding the Muslims like they're doing right now. Do you think the world has any moral culpability to do really anything to stop it? Do you at all?
Or let's say Nazi Germany.
Well, if it's in their best interest, they can stop it if they want.
Well, the government doesn't necessarily serve the interests of the people all the time. It was not in the interests of the people of Myanmar for them to expel 750,000 Rohingya Muslims, but they did it because of their hardcore nationalism. And that's another point I'd like to emphasize, that nationalism has been the cause of the worst genocides in human history, where globalism has never caused a...
And nationalism has been the cause of the worst ethnic cleansings in history as well. During World War One, like the most talked about is the Armenian genocide.
And I do think that globalism inherently kind of like pats down upon those, like pushes down upon those things, upon those genocides. It was, I mean, the 18th century and the 19th century when nationalism really came about is some of the like bloodiest parts of human history. When
And 20th century as well, of course.
the nation
I
state
just,
was being created.
I just think it's quite retarded what you're saying.
Really?
Pardon my French. You're saying nationalists are the ones doing the genocide.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Like all you have to do is go back to the history of the formation of the nation states to see that. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Like in Germany or in Myanmar or in Ethiopia. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Dylan. Okay, we gotta let Joker explain why. I understand you think it's dumb, Joker. He laid the charge on you that nationalists are causing genocide. So I think it's fair that you have to correct that record if you
Well,
disagree.
yeah, nationalism has led to many, like, like let's take Germany as an example, right? The formation of the nation state and the nation of Germany. And Germany has given also birth to ideologies such as treating Slavic people as lesser, to modern day anti-Semitism, to anti-Semitism as we understand it today, and it combined itself with eugenics and a few other ideologies that later became, after World War I, Nazis, like Nazi ideology.
You think it's retarded? You have to be willing to correct that record.
Of course.
And
So
be careful and let him explain.
So in Germany, just because it's a National Socialist Party, were they socialists? When were the Nazi socialists? Just because you call a thing something, it just doesn't really make them nationalists. They were more of imperialists. Hitler wrote
No,
it.
they were absolutely nationalistic. There was like the most important idea was first and foremost the idea of a coherent, not German national identity, of winning the Lebensraum for the German people, the breathing, the living space for the German people, which often would include taking out peoples from places like Poland or Ukraine or other places, emptying them out and settling them with German people. So this is like claiming that that Nazi Germany was not nationalistic is like it's not correct. It's not correct.
In Mein Kampf that he doesn't believe in sovereignty of other states. So how is that a nationalist thing?
Yeah, he doesn't believe in the sovereignty of other states. Nationalism is not when you believe in the sovereignty of other states. Nationalism is when you believe in the cohesion and the sovereignty of your own state, your own nation state. You don't need to accept the sovereignty of other nation states in order to be a nationalist. The German nation state before World War, during World War I and during its creation before World War I, did not believe in the sovereignty of Poland. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't nationalistic. It was, totally.
Is that okay? Can I respond? Okay, so
Yes.
I hope that maybe Dylan will say some of these things because it's pretty important, I think.
nationalism is definitely a very strong part of Hitler's ideology. He was an ultra-nationalism. Fundamental in Nazi ideology was nationalism, this belief in the German nation state and the German people and the strength of the German culture and all these things that are so great, so amazing.
And the belief that the Slavic people did not have culture, that Slavic people were actually less than human, and that they should be turned into slaves. You know, the word slave does come from the word Slav, and that they must be made subservient, and they must be cleaned out of the area, and the German people must be brought in to settle those areas as Lebensraum.
And he was so great in his mind that he had to expand it through Lebensraum and invading other nations.
Yes, exactly.
Can be imperialists.
Exactly.
For example, Vladimir Putin. He is a nationalist. He is openly admitted a nationalist, and he's invading Ukraine in an imperialist war to try to get access to Ukraine's resources, try to get access to bases that are beneficial to him, and because he believes in this idea, or at least the nationalists around him believe in the idea of Novorossiya, this idea of Greater Russia. And
exactly. Darren needs to ask him what he thinks nationalism is. Yeah, I think so.
that is nationalism. So you can be a nationalist and an imperialist. I don't think those two things are contradictory. Like, it may be a specific type of nationalism that is isolationist, but
Let's let him respond. Let Joker respond.
Thank you, Dylan. You really like to talk. I know. I
I try
understand.
to have the substance where you lack it, you know?
Oh, I do disagree. I think you're just babbling a little bit here. Maybe you're a little bit ableist, trying to take advantage of my ADHD. So,
Or something else.
nationalist. Yeah, of course. I'm not the one with the square face. Anyway, nationalists. Just because some nationalists have done something wrong in the past doesn't make them, like, every single nationalist evil. Would you agree that globalists have done fucked up shit in the world history?
Of course, but globalists don't.
So are all globalists evil, such as the Nazis?
I
Are
don't-
nationalistic in their evil?
Well, I don't think every globalist is evil. My claim wasn't that every single nationalist.
So
is
why
evil.
are you claiming
Why
that
are you-
all nationalists are evil?
Just finish
Why
the
is
statement, tell me when I
nationalism?
can respond.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So why do you think all nationalists are evil just because some nationalists in the past have been evil?
Dylan can't think that all nationalists are evil, first of all, because he recognizes the national sentiment that is right now in Ukraine. That's one. Dylan simply recognizes that nationalism as a concept leads to very harmful outcomes. That's different.
Well, again,
You just said that all globalists are not evil just because some globalists are fucked up, right?
I never said that every nationalist is evil. My point was that genocide and racism and these things that lead to genocides, like in
Were
Myanmar,
brought about
Ethiopia,
by nationalism, yeah.
Germany, Turkey, Russia, or any other country that has had hardcore nationalists, the most strong and the biggest historical examples, the most prominent historical examples you can point to of hardcore nationalists taking power, many of them have descended into genocide through their ultranationalism because of their ultranationalism, because they let it take over themselves, and they started saying, well, these Kurdish people, that's fucked. It's against the Turkish state. They're not Kurdish. They're mountain Turks. We need to
Okay, so
force
you're talking about ethnical nationalism here.
yes, that's a form of nationalism, like I said. And so I'm not saying every nationalist is evil, but I'm saying genocide and these types of horrific crimes seems to be a problem of many nationalist leaders and nationalist movements all across the world. And I think that's bad. Whereas globalism and globalist ideas don't really, while they cause bad things, that's not really a problem of it. Nobody's like, oh my God, he believed in the markets, and so he decided he was going to kill all of the fucking Jews. Like, no, that's not a thing. Because globalism, the best types of globalism, and the globalism that is most effective are the types that treat people as individuals and trade between nation states and views culture almost kind of like, even in a milquetoast way, which you have a problem with. But that's not, if you view culture in that milquetoast way, you're not going to go genociding people over it.
So you're arguing for the best types of globalism versus the worst types of nationalism?
What I'm asking you is, how do you address this bad problem with nationalism and all of these genocides occurring, all these horrible things that are occurring? How would you stop that from happening in your totalitarian, anarchist, and nationalist state?
Find God, do good, don't be evil. It's not that hard.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, the Germans
Just
were
because
very religious.
I am nationalistic. I am nationalistic. I like my country to be a nationalistic country.
Find God, do good, and don't do evil. Got it.
Like that it's a certain identity. Does not necessarily make me hate other people. I want other people to have their own nationalistic places.
Okay.
Cultural. I am a cultural nationalist. So every culture can have their own place. Why do you have to mix everything together? And just because I want my own place doesn't mean I want to go into my neighbor's place and destroy it.
So the way you're going to stop your nationalist, totalitarian, anarchist movement, which is totalitarian, so I assume your movement has a lot of control over this proposed
Okay,
society,
so let me help you here.
And of course, like the whole idea of the nation state again is leads to pretty destructive results, because before the formation of the nation states, there were many people who were not included in the newly formed nations that lived there for hundreds of years. So how can you use the argument of other people going into my home when there were different kinds of people that lived in this home for hundreds of years, and where they were suddenly expelled from those countries because they became outsiders all of a sudden, because they were not included in the newly formed nations?
I am a little bit of a
Like the whole argument about somebody intruding into the home is ridiculous.
totalitarian in the way if I was the dictator here. And an anarchist is more of a, because governments are fucking retarded. So those two things do not come together. Thank you, but you may continue.
So you're an anarchist, but what's your view on immigration? You want to restrict it?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just a little confused, that's all.
That's okay.
So I just want to know, when you're building this government, how you're going to stop the nationalism from getting out of control, as it has in many states. And most of the time, it doesn't even end with genocide, but it does end with discriminatory policies, or possibly like conquests in the other countries where they get their rightful land. I mean, there was many countries who have done that, either during for example, the fall of Yugoslavia, or during the 18th and 19th century. It was like, this is our native land, we must take it back, and we must do this. The Russians are doing that right now. How would you stop that taking over this proposed nationalist state, as it has many others?
Yeah, so I'm the dictator here in this scenario.
Sure.
So you do evil shit, you get executed. It's that easy.
Wow.
That's a non-answer, because in the mind of the dictator that wants to do this, he's doing the right thing, so he should be awarded.
Okay, thank you. You answered all my questions.
That's a non-answer.
I have no more.
No problem. Okay, genocide is evil.
Okay.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Okay, can we move into cultural, because really that's my biggest gripe.
I'm gonna step in again. I want to give this to you, Joker, to kind of.
Batman gave up. Batman is giving up. Batman is just dumbfounded by the Joker. Batman does not know what to say.
Explain how nations ought to structure themselves culturally, morally, things like that. And then Dylan, I'm sure you'll have a response, but kind of give an argument for a globalist, like what a globalist
Batman
culture
is
would look like, and how
not
you can actually
doing
unify the cultural standards across all
Batman
of
is
the
annoying.
locations. But let's go to Joker first, argue for the nationalist side, and then we'll get back to you. Good.
So what a nationalistic country should base itself on is a little bit of history, a little bit of culture, a little bit of religion. That's pretty.
What if a country has a history of being multi-religious, multicultural, and multinational? What then? What then should the nation base itself on?
A little bit of sunshine as well. Exactly. So, pretty much, I am a cultural nationalist, so I believe a distinct culture should have their own nation, should have their own country, in my opinion. If you raise your eyebrows at that, it's quite interesting.
I raise my eyebrows at that because the legacy of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was that of being multicultural, multi-ethnical, multinationalistic, and multi-religious. So, yeah, of course I will raise my eyebrows at that. It's not
So a culture defines the morality of the country, defines the laws, what they want to achieve. And a globalist would say, oh, well, I do not agree with those people there, so I'm going to step in. Right? I'm going to change what they're doing. And I don't think that's exactly right. So because I'm not quite, what I'm lacking from this debate is who is the one deciding the morality and what makes them, what makes the leading, so the UN is run by America, right? American morality is dictating what the UN does basically. So why is US morality better than the rest of the world? And
if the U.S. controls the UN, why was the invasion of Iraq not a UN intervention?
Well, they wanted to really, they really wanted that oil. They really wanted that oil.
No, I'm asking if they control the UN, why does the UN give them the thumbs up and approve it?
Right.
Well, because they had to create 9/11 and
Okay, please,
everything like that.
What? That strange, weird conspiracy theory answer has nothing to do with the question.
that was fucking completely incomprehensible. What does that even mean? What do you mean they had to create 9/11? That's why.
So how would the UN distribute the
UN
oil
could make
of
it a
Iraq
UN
into the
peacekeeping
US?
mission, or the UN can endorse a mission, like they did, for example, in Libya, or like they have done in Haiti or other countries.
Well, it wasn't a peacekeeping mission; it was an act of war.
Oh, okay, but
They
the
were
thing
in
is,
war with
the
Iraq.
UN intervention can be approved. For example, the liberation of Kuwait was a UN mission that Russia and China let happen because they were like, yes, actually Saddam invading Kuwait and messing with the markets as he has, we are against that. We have no problem to endorse that, so we're going to abstain and let this happen, right? They didn't do that when it came to Iraq, when it came to the actual invasion of Iraq and the removal of Saddam, because they have influence over the UN Security Council. Russia could stop something by just saying no because they have veto power. So the idea that the UN is controlled by the United States because the United States gives the most money to the UN, China is actively increasing the amount of money they're giving, and we don't even contribute the most peacekeepers. I think
And they're
that's
going to take
Bangladesh.
more control as a result.
China
But
will
for
have more
now, it's the
influence,
US.
but the United States does not have complete control of the UN, like you said, because the UN will not approve many of
They have the
America's
majority of
intervention.
influence.
What does that even mean? Maybe like a plurality compared to other countries, but I don't think they have majority influence over it.
You
They're
said-
one seat.
you said
Wait, you asked me a
Chinese
question.
influence is gonna
You asked me a
rise.
question. I'm answering it. They're
Right.
one seat on the UN Security Council and one seat when it comes to the General Assembly. They just don't have enough power alone to do this much. For example, Israel. Look at the UN votes on Israel. The biggest countries that back Israel is America and sometimes Australia because Australia likes America. But the UN
America
Security
vetoes the shit out of anything.
Yes, it
against
does, because
Israel.
that's but that power
That is
also
an
given to
American
Russia.
interest, and they're
Okay.
controlling UN.
They're not controlling UN because Russia, China, and all these other countries on the Security Council have that same power. If we tried to do a UN vote on, I don't know, Xinjiang is an independent state now because of what they're doing to the Muslims there, that would fail even if every country in the world besides China voted for it, including the United States. No matter how much pressure America put on it, we would never be able to accomplish that. No, why? Because we don't control the UN. China has a lot of influence. Russia has a lot of influence. We're a
Why
bigger
did the
country, so we have
UN
more
not
influence.
stop?
It's not that
Yes, that's
surprising.
a lot of words. Why did the UN not stop the invasion in Iraq? If they're such a peacekeeping company and they're totally not owned by the US,
Exactly.
so
That's why
why did
they should have
stop it?
more influence to stop wars like that. Exactly. They should have more influence to say that's an illegal war. You're committing a crime of aggression. We're going to send peacekeepers to stop this. Like that's the type of stuff where I would be absolutely ecstatic with. In fact, I think with more UN peacekeepers, the casualties in Iraq, even if they weren't able to stop the war, would have been less.
Somebody just made an argument against themselves. Well, oops.
Like
You're
it
not
was in
getting
every
what
other conflict they got involved.
You're not getting what I'm saying here. The UN didn't do anything
Exactly,
in Iraq
that's the
because
problem.
it
They
is
should
run
have
by
gotten involved.
US. No, exactly.
But no,
because
no. The UN couldn't stop
it is-
any power that large from invading another country. The UN hasn't done anything about Russia invading Ukraine. Does that mean Russia controls the United Nations? No, it means
That
they have a lot of
means UN
influence
is
because of
pretty
their veto
useless.
power. So America's useless, but they control the UN. They're so pathetic and so unable to do anything. to
America's
stop
very
Russia, but they're
powerful. The
also
UN is pretty
they
useless.
control the UN.
UN is pretty useless in defending any other interest than the Western sphere, is what I think.
So do you think its mission in the Ivory Coast when it like de-armed all those extremists like that was useless, even though that saved lives? Or the other 10 operations they did in countries fighting civil war, which have not returned to civil war, and they were successful in executing their mandate? Was that all useless?
No, it's very useful in supporting the pro-Western governments
It's
that have been
useful in
established
stopping
in these
murder
places.
and genocide.
I doubt he even knows. I am gonna say I doubt he even knows what those things were.
And slaughter. Like, these are countries that were in complete chaos.
Okay, just because it's a civil war doesn't mean it's a genocide.
I didn't say all of these were genocides, but genocides were a problem in many of these conflicts.
Okay, and that's great. I can see that if it's a problem, it's evil.
Can I ask you about Brexit?
Sure.
So the UK voted to leave the EU, which I would like to show just from that if you join one of these globalist organizations, you can leave at any time. They left the EU if they wanted to. They could even leave the UN if they really wanted to. They left the EU. And then all of the economic promises that a lot of nationalists made, like when they were driving around the bus saying you're going to give this much back into the NHS, and we're going to have all this economic sovereignty is going to make us very economically prosperous. Every year since they've left the EU has been not great for the British economy. In fact, British politics right now is in a spiral with the Prime Minister jumping to Prime Minister after they've voted to leave. Since David Cameron, Theresa May,
That's
Boris
true.
Johnson, Liz Truss, now Rishi
That is
Sunak.
true.
The majority of British people polled on this EU vote. Now if they were to do
And the funniest thing is that the whole poll was just a thing that the person that created it did not even believe that would go through.
do it again, would want to be back within the European Union, so they could have visa access, so they could deal with the Northern Ireland issue, which was a huge problem once they left the EU, because they didn't know if they would have to put a hard border there to like stop the peace agreement. This is nationalists actively trying to decouple from the global sphere, and it's just having a negative effect on their country.
Yeah, and they chose the hard choice because the overbearing EU government was just too much to handle. Exactly.
What was the thing that they did that was so overbearing that it makes all these economic consequences and endangering Irish peace worth it?
Maybe we're gonna hear some arguments. Let's go. Let's hear it.
The most British people don't even agree with that now.
Of course, because the EU terrorizes whatever doesn't agree with it, right? So if
What?
you're going to leave the EU, you're going to suffer consequences, right? It's the definition of
I mean,
if you don't do what we like, we're going to sanction you.
Coconut
If you
Island.
leave us,
Yeah,
okay,
the
great.
UK is not sanctioned.
Sanctioned many other countries,
Who
like
is-
Hungary.
Like they did not sanction it. It's just like the deals that they had with the UK have become no more. Like, what?
They've sanctioned countries like Russia for invading other countries, but when it comes to Britain, the
EU
separation, the economic separation was the problem when it came to the EU economy. In the British economy. The British economy hurt because of that lack of access to European markets, and the deals they made were just not as powerful as just complete access to the EU and the visa-free travel. Like it hurt their economy. It has done nothing to help the British. In fact, I would say the British are more disunited than ever when you see how many prime ministers are just like rolling through the door and then rolling out of the door.
True.
Yeah, leaving a union is pretty hard on a country.
This decision has caused economic and political chaos in the UK. These are things that are not good for the working people of Great Britain.
Yeah, horrible.
Especially not good for the Irish.
What the EU did is they wanted total secession from UK into EU. They didn't want a sort of a middle state. They wanted UK to have a euro. They wanted to completely absorb UK, and UK just wasn't going along with it. So
What?
And
Who
now
wanted-
the result,
Keep
their
pressing
economy
the
is
issue.
weaker.
Who wanted to absorb the UK? The European Union wanted to absorb the UK?
They're less powerful and less influential than ever. They thought
Right,
they would return to the era before the EU, but all they've done is even reduce their influence on the global stage even more.
Yeah, exactly. I agree that politicians' promises sometimes don't fulfill themselves. Well, most of the time.
Also,
you're talking about the buses, right?
you said that they tried to force the euro on them. When did that happen?
Yeah, why did that
Well,
happen?
that's the goal of European Union, to unionize everything, right?
Wait,
It's a
no,
union.
No. Countries have to agree to get into the euro. Poland is not in the eurozone. European Union does not force countries to get the euro. That is absolutely not true. There is no pressure from the European Union for Poland to get into the euro. Absolutely no. And England never had the euro. It kept its pound, just like Poland kept its Polish zloty.
The euro is completely voluntary.
True.
Like they
Oh,
can
Yep.
have the
of
pound.
course.
It is.
It's
What do you mean? Of course,
voluntary.
it is a voluntary. They literally, the British had the
It's
pound.
100% voluntary. There is literally no pressure on Poland to force it to adopt the euro, which is why Poland still has the Polish zloty to this day. This is why, since the Polish zloty is much weaker than the euro and the dollar, people can pay less money in dollars for my mom's fundraiser, and we received more in Polish zlotys. Yeah.
For the entirety of the euro's existence, there was no
Yeah,
gun held to their head saying you have to take it. It is voluntary.
It's voluntary in the same way. It's like taking a candy from a stranger. Oh, it's voluntary.
What? What do you mean? What are you trying to say with this example of a candy taken from a stranger? Poland has no euro.
You just,
What is that? Yes, taking candy from a stranger is voluntary. You can choose to not do that. I wouldn't take candy from a stranger. That is
if you're a
involuntary.
child, if you like candy, if you're a government and you like more money, it's voluntary.
Yeah, if you're a child and you like candy, and you have good parents that teach you not to take candy from strangers, then you can choose not to do it. Is there as a backup for smaller countries? I mean, the EU was primarily to protect smaller countries from collapsing and causing stability on the borders of larger ones. Right? Like, Poland did not take the euro, and there's like really no pressure from the EU saying, Poland, you better change your currency to the euro. There's no such thing. Like, no. Like, this whole euro argument, you can clearly see that this person has no clue what they are talking about.
Tell you to join something.
What would it, so you're saying,
money, right?
to be clear, there was no monetary, we're going to give you all this money if you take the euro. But even if there was,
True. For some countries, actually going to the euro would be bad. For Poland, going for the euro would probably be bad, because suddenly there could be a situation in which the prices for everything would be a lot bigger because they would be in euro. Like, Poland going for the euro would be very bad for me, for example.
why would that be a problem? That would sound like an amazing deal for
Like, really bad.
the British if they were just going to get like a cash infusion for taking the euro.
Because they
No
want
other
their own
countries can
thing
offer
and
that
that's
deal.
it. They want their own thing and that's it.
Okay,
No.
It's not
but
like
yeah, that sounds like North Korea and Juche ideology. It doesn't work well. The countries have said, I'm going to do my own thing, like Japan used to do before American ships bombarded their shores saying, welcome to the new world, you're technologically backward, or how Russia's trying to do right now, or how the British are trying to do. It always seems to end with them being in a worse economic position and usually less powerful, as they are. They're not returning to the empire of old.
Yeah, like Japan didn't behave themselves and the globalists showed them their place. Exactly.
Japan, what do you mean? What about Japan?
Japan was a empire that that wanted to create a empire for all of Asia. It wasn't just some small backward country. And that's the wild thing going back to Greece again. It's going to the euro saved it, but what's really bad for the euro as a whole, right?
Well, the overarching theme of globalism seems to
Yes,
be
it's an unstoppable force. Exactly. Yes.
yes, it's an ultimate evolution of imperialism. Right? Would you agree?
No, I would not agree.
You would
Because
not agree
there's
that
globalist communism that can be like completely un-imperialist. It's like we're all going to be on a massive commune and they can like you can make a.
Where's that? Where do you see that?
Where do I see them? Like
Popular, yeah.
a lot of anarchists, which a lot of communist anarchists and comms believe that there can be people who believe in like a one world.
Are they running the UN?
No,
These
they're not running the
communist
UN. But
globalists?
the idea that globalism is just imperialism by a different name is silly. And let's say that it is. Let's say for a second your definition of imperialism meets that. What if my answer is just I don't care? Like if these countries decide they want to trade with us, that's their free will. They're allowed to. Are we really going to dictate you shouldn't be trading with them, even though it's economically better?
Coercion is not free will. I thought we
Trade.
talked
Then
about
all
this.
trade, capitalism is inherently coercion. Like
Yeah, basically.
So
Yeah.
therefore, any trade deal between
Oh, Dylan did the Coconut Island by saying that capitalism is inherently coercion. So Dylan bit Joker. Batman bit Joker, has beaten Joker to the Coconut Island. That's wild thing going back to Greece again. And going to the Euro save it, but
any country, which you've already said you endorse, is coercion.
No,
Yes, it is. You're
balanced
offering
trade
them
deals are
economic
coercion.
deal. All trade deals. will be
Unfair
a-
deal. No, unfair is coercion, right?
Then don't
If you're
accept a coercive
forced to-
deal. Like that's your
Okay,
government's decision.
that's such an elitist way of thinking. If you're hungry, do not accept food.
If there
just
is
don't
a-
accept it.
I'm not okay. Then you.
If you're a third world
then
country,
accept
just
it.
don't
Then
accept.
accept it. If you need to, if this deal gives them
if you're
food,
a
then that's
third world
good.
country, just don't accept the unfavorable deal. Just don't accept it. Just don't get devastated by Nestle. Just don't take the money.
Okay. I mean, yes, that would be my advice to them. Don't. If it's a bad deal, don't take it.
Just go starve.
Not go starve, but then you can build your own different style of government. But what I'm telling you is every style of government that takes a hardcore, like, we're going to be nationalists, we're going to do our best to separate ourselves from these international economies and these trade deals, like the Juche style ideology in North Korea has always ended in failure and disaster. Eritrea is another example of this, an extremely isolationist country who's tried to go down this path and has failed.
No, I really want to stick you on this point. So just because something is quote unquote free will of a choice, if you're forced for something by your circumstances, it makes it totally fine. If a third world country is
I'm not
forced to
saying the
accept
deal
a
is
deal,
okay, but I'm saying what my advice would be to any country offered a bad deal would be like, don't accept it. For example, like people say this about NATO.
so
but it wasn't
if
like
you see
NATO that came
if
to-
you see a starving person being made a fool of themselves for money by an evil person, you would tell them just don't take the money and go starve.
I would tell them that they should probably do something else to get that money. Find a better deal. That would be my offer. That would be what I would say. If you're made offered a bad trade deal, you don't accept the bad trade deal. Like, accept good deals, don't accept bad deals. And anybody making the bad deals, I would say, yeah, that's bad of them. They shouldn't be doing that. But when it comes to EU membership, that wasn't a bad deal. Countries are fighting to try to get into the EU because it's economically prosperous.
Okay,
I mean,
Dylan-
Europe is extremely wealthy.
Okay, Dylan, would you suck a dick for $1 billion?
Absolutely.
Would you suck a dick that you didn't want to suck if there was no money involved?
No,
Would you suck a dick that you don't want to suck, but now they offer $1 billion for it? Would you suck it?
probably.
Is that not coercion?
That is coercion, but then capitalism is inherently coercive, right? So
Yeah,
unless
if
you're
it's a bad
offering the
deal,
overthrow
exactly.
of capitalism, right? If that's your proposal that you're a communist and you would
Right.
get rid of capitalism, then okay. But I think sometimes coercion isn't bad. Like I'm coerced inherently to stream today. I kind of didn't want to. I had a sore throat, but I was coerced through money and upholding an obligation to come anyway. Was
Uh-oh.
that bad? Was that negative? Should I have not talked to you today and held up to the responsibilities that were inherently coercive offered to me by Zen Shapiro? Like, no, I still think I fulfilled those duties. I'm
You're
telling you
very
that the EU is a good
evil,
deal.
Zen.
It is a good deal, and the Brexit was a bad idea. Most British believe
True.
that, and now their economy is suffering as a result. They have higher inflation.
Brexit was a
It like
joke.
15%. Last time I checked,
Brexit
the high
was
rates they were hitting at
horrible.
one point.
Okay, that's great. So let's do a little role play. Pretend that you're.
They should invite Vosh into this talk. They are both so close to the Coconut Island. True. They should make that analogy. When I edit this into a segment, I should literally like splice in somewhere the Coconut Island thing. I should splice in Vosh explaining the Coconut Island thing.
The embodiment of Vietnamese government. So, okay,
it's a-
Nike
sorry,
come
change character.
and you're struggling. You're really struggling. It's like 40 years ago. GDP is really in the dog shit. You're struggling. Nike comes along, says, "Well, we're gonna make it better, but all you gotta do is make the little children work in the factory. You know, it's a free choice. But if you take it, you're gonna get a lot of more money. You're gonna develop. If you don't take it, well, too bad. So, what do you think of that?
Now, I would say no. But I would still want to make a deal with Nike, even if the wages those workers were getting were less than the wages Americans were getting. You could say that's inherently exploitative, and I would even agree with you. But at the end of the day, Vietnam is in a much better economic place because of its trade and economic relationship with the United States. Vietnam is great.
Yeah, Vietnam is such a bad example to give Joker because Vietnam was extremely impoverished because before it accepted to open its markets to investment, you know. Like, Vietnam is the last example that you want to give. Vietnam was in a really bad spot before it accepted some market reforms, you know. I know. Like, I have people that sort of went through it. Like, their families went through the poverty period and then they have experienced things going better. So I'm not sure if Vietnam is like the example you want to be giving Joker.
Greatly improved their economic position, and Vietnamese people, after we slaughtered Vietnam. I mean, we butchered that fucking country, and they have a very positive
yeah, you did.
interpretation of the United States. Most Vietnamese people have a positive view of the United States because of the relationship we built since then.
Because all the aggressors were killed.
What do you mean all the aggressors were killed? What do you mean? Like, yeah, they won, and so now they said globalism time, and globalism helped them build a more prosperous country.
Yeah.
They didn't inherit Stalinist ideas and like, we're going to build a Stalinist
It's like
country.
when Japan is acting up, we're gonna nuke the fuck out of them. Oh well, then now they like us. That's a great thing. We just nuked them. That's
It is-
great.
That's Vietnam War was not Vietnam acting up and the US bombing it. Like, you should educate yourself on the Vietnam War, and I'm not gonna be explaining the whole backstory to the Vietnam War.
I don't think it's great that I don't know where you're putting my mouth, that I think it's great that we nuked Japan, okay? When we talk about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, I guess that's to be another discussion, but I do think it's good that a country that we used to be adversaries with, now through the power of magic, power of friendship and globalism,
Yeah,
Japan's now one of our
the
closest
power
allies
of
to trade partners.
magic, child lung cancer infusing fumes.
What,
inhaling
we gave
fumes.
Japanese kids lung cancer?
No,
fumes?
no.
What?
Stay with me. Let's go back to Vietnam, right? Let's go
We
back
brought
to
up
child
Japan,
labor.
Okay, we're off of Japan,
Yeah.
off of Hiroshima.
Yeah, don't ADHD shame me, thank you. So we're back into Vietnam, and you're like, oh, it's a great thing. Like, well,
Yes.
look, all these children got cancer, but now we're a much better country because of it. So it was worth it.
You could say this about industrialization as well. In our country, in our history as Americans, we have done many nasty things. Slave people, we had child in factories, we did a lot of very gross things that also increased our nation's productivity and growth and stuff. And I can say today that the fact slavery's gone, and
Like, I'm gonna need a citation on the children in factories in Vietnam.
we're like more and more moving
I
towards
really
this
gonna need some citation on that.
idea of equality. I think that's a good thing, and I'm happy that we're there. And I think that black people in the United States are really contributing a lot. And so I'm happy that where we are now, not necessarily the methods we use to get there when it comes to slavery and stuff like that. We talk about globalism. I'm not happy with the child working in factory or the examples you're giving.
Well, you can't just assume, oh, Vietnam, then it must have children in factories, you know? You're gonna have to give me some data on that one.
But that doesn't mean that because I wouldn't want children to work in a factory, then we should drop the idea on investing in Vietnam or drop the idea of trading with Vietnam, which is all what I'm proposing is globalism. I'm not advocating for sins and crimes against God, like making tiny little children put together little toys or whatever. I'm advocating for trade and interconnectedness as a bringer of peace, diplomacy,
True.
and economic prosperity. And I don't need to have children do that. I'm not saying we always engage in good trade practices.
Okay, so globalism isn't all lovey-dovey. We can agree on that one, at least.
No system is perfect.
Agent Orange didn't even. No, he's talking about children in factories producing stuff, for which I will need some citation. Agent Orange did not cause lung cancer. Agent Orange causes a lot of horrible things, but I do not actually think that lung cancer is among them. Agent Orange causes horrible deformities to the body. For example, I've seen people that were and are victims of Agent Orange work sewing things for people and sell them, and people have really bad deformities from Agent Orange. There are people today living with really, really big deformities to their bodies due to Agent Orange. That is true. That is undeniable.
I mean, democracy is extreme, has a million different problems with it, but I think it's the best system out of the systems proposed. Every system has its pros and cons, and of course, you can use systems to do bad things with them, right? Like you can have a really good, let's say a country has really good cops, but then they use them to do bad things. Like you can still have an effective system, but using them to do bad things. Like I think you can be globalist and have globalism without doing it in the worst ways, right? Like you were just saying with nationalism earlier. That was your defense against the idea of genocide. I can use that as a defense against the idea.
Are we becoming friends here? So we can be like nationalistic globalist buddies and stop all the wrong shit in the world.
Some of the biggest nationalists in the world are very, very globalist when it comes to economics. Now, when it comes to immigration in other parts, because of their their base, they might change their tune. But it really depends on the government. Like I would say, like Shinzo Abe, somebody hated immigration. I think that his position on immigration severely undercut the Japanese economy, which people thought in the 80s was going to dominate the world. People really thought that in the 80s. But in part due to their policies on immigration, that economic growth they could have seen to turn them into that powerhouse didn't really happen. But the rest of the economic policies he did when it comes to trading,
that's because a lot of economic growth in Japan happened due to Vietnam War and the Korean War. Those were really huge boosts to Japanese economy.
the West and engaging global trade, incredibly globalist. And even his opposition, if elected in power, would still engage in a lot of globalist economics because the world's entire economy is built upon globalism. That's why it's like the ocean. You can't fight it.
So basically, we're agreeing here that the globalism, which is like communication between sovereign countries that have their own nationalistic interests, and the globalism that's a trade that's beneficial and exploitative, and all the rest of it is cancer. We agree?
We don't agree, because everything in your room right now is in part given to you by globalism. Like, you would not be able to talk to me right now if you didn't benefit from globalism.
Okay,
The technological innovations.
I love these things. I would much rather live in a wooden cabin.
I think the vast majority of people would not rather live in a wooden cabin where if you stub your toe the wrong way, you die, and half your children die during childbirth. Like that, I think most people would not want to live in that reality. Would rather live in the reality where globalism and technological innovation and trade of ideas and sciences and all this between states brought us to where we are now in the West, which is quite prosperous when you look generally at human history.
Everything in my room is a globalist thing, not because of product. Thank you, English explaining. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Because my country has been
explaining. Tech bubble also benefited Japan as well. A lot of the companies remained after the American ones collapsed.
robbed of its industry by globalism. It just does not mean that my country wouldn't be able to produce things on its own. And you were speaking of Germany as a nationalistic state. So do you think when it was cut off by the rest of the world, it simply ceased to get goods and everybody started living in the woods? Or Russia right now, they're not producing their own stuff to survive?
So Germany's economy was severely impacted by cutting off of trade with nations like the United States, which it benefited from. In World War I, one of the major contributors...
The United States has a lot of money, yeah?
Yes, but that's, globalism. You trade with...
Also, Russia is producing its cheap knockoffs of the thing that it doesn't have anymore.
Those states which have a lot of money. In World War I, a big contributor to Germany losing was the fact that the United States continued to trade with the UK and France, but did not continue to trade with the Germans. And that was a big contributor to their losing. Their failure to work with the global order and globalism in their choice of trying to conquer all this land and trying to be involved in this war, that was impacted by their rejection of globalism. And so I do think that these states that engage in behavior like you're talking about, trying to cut themselves off in the world, usually end up fucking themselves. The nations you look at that in the world that have done that right now, Eritrea, backwater. And I say that very nicely to the people. People are wonderful, but the government is creating the country to a backwater. When you look at the North Koreans, the Juche ideology is built upon what you're describing.
North Korea is like the worst place to be.
To cut yourself off of the world. It is a country that is extremely despotic. No one would want to live there. People are constantly trying to get the fuck out because its economy is shit and its government is horrific. And Russia's economy has been severely impacted from their invasion of Ukraine. And the average Russian is now in a worse economic position because of it. And hundreds of thousands have fled the country because their jobs have just disappeared due to these Western companies leaving. When you fight against globalism and the ways that they tried to fight against globalism, that's the impact on your country. It makes it, using a Trump word, it can make your country a real shithole.
So it truly is a cancerous.
No, I'm saying that you fighting against it is the problem. Because the thing is with cancer, you fight against cancer and hopefully you get better. That isn't the thing with globalism. You can't win, number one, you can't win a fight with globalism, and fighting it makes it worse because it's bringing you benefits. It's like trying to fight Santa Claus. It's like, what the fuck? Let him in.
Beneficial to whom?
Beneficial to everyone involved. The Vietnamese are in a much better economic position, and Americans are getting cheaper
True.
products, higher productivity. Like, it is
Vietnam was in a really bad state. It's true.
beneficial, not to mention
Before the
the prosperity that's coming.
Oh, let's not go back to the babies.
Okay, whatever. We go back to
All right, I gotta step in. We gotta cut it at some point. We are.
Can we like just a little bit of the culture? I just want to
Yeah,
to
here,
hear Dylan's thoughts.
you can finish up on this point, but I do want to get into closers here over the next couple minutes. So get your responses in there, Joker. Go ahead.
Oh, we're finishing.
Yeah, I wondered, what do you think about?
We're not gonna go through the questions. We're just gonna watch the debate. We do not have to go through the questions from the audience. I
Like,
think.
Through globalism, everything just sort of seems to become the same. What do you think about that? Is it true? Is it not true?
No,
McDonald's
not
everywhere,
true.
every city looks the same. It's kind of
No.
boring to me because when I go to China,
Not
I'm
true.
like, I
That
want
is
to see
actually
China. I don't
not
want to
true.
see Chinese-speaking United States. What do you think?
I believe that I've been I went to Ukraine. I was in a few European countries while I was there.
You can see it's not all the same. Like Eastern Europe is like a very specific feel to it. It's very like the difference between Germany and Poland is actually very noticeable, and it's not just talk about economics. It is just a certain feel.
I did see definite differences between
Yep.
Poland and Ukraine and all these different countries, and I do think that a lot of these differences are beautiful, and I understand people trying to preserve them when it comes to their architecture and stuff like that. But
Of
I
course,
also,
keep in mind that parts of Ukraine that were Ukraine were Poland before World War II, and Ukraine and Poland share a certain history. It's like,
think that you can engage in globalism and you can engage in international trade and be part of these international institutions and even things like visa-free travel while preserving your language and your culture and your architecture through even, and I'll be even fine with this, and this is something that gives me a little bit of scorn, government programs to like sponsor.
yeah, it's Dylan is correct. I think one of those issues with Joker is that he can imagine a world where something good can come outside of Christian principles or within his mystery country. I very much imagine this person has never left his country. True.
the arts or try to preserve the language. Even though I don't like exactly how the Ukrainians have done it, I do think their government's idea of preserving their language, considering Russia's historical oppression of the Ukrainian language, is completely understandable. And I'm perfectly fine with
Like they've done it the same way like Lithuania and Poland did it, right? Like through the Poland had its flying universities, the so-called flying universities, the underground education system that sort of opposed the Russification and at that time Germanification as well. And when World War II happened and Germany occupied Poland, education was banned for the most part as well, and the sort of the tradition of the flying universities sort of came back, and underground illegal education was installed once more. And after the war, the fruits of that illegal education translated into actual official diplomas and degrees. So this is basically how in countries that are occupied, enslaved, language is preserved through illegal organization, through illegal defiance against the erasure. Also, nationalism, when it runs into a problem that it itself can solve, like you can be isolationist without a supply of lithium, which means eventually you will have to invade to get lithium. True.
that. But that shouldn't. I don't think the best way to do that is we're just going to cut off all immigration because other people speaking their language might destroy our language, right? I think the better program would be when people come to this country, maybe we have a language program to make sure that they learn the language before they get permanent residency. Stuff like that would be much better than dropping all of the economic benefits that come with immigration to either bringing up the higher production values or the
Immigration cannot erase a language. That is not a thing that happens, you know? People immigrating into a country will not cause that language to disappear.
fact, here's a fun fact that people don't know about immigrants. An immigrant is double the chance of a normal person. If you're like a naturalized citizen, there's a double chance And on average,
That will
for an
not
immigrant to
happen.
actually start a business compared to a native-born American citizen, 30% of American entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs that are making businesses, are immigrants, even though they only make 13% of the American population. That is a massive economic contributor. That's creating
You're
jobs.
applying
That's
an
good.
American statistic to the rest of the world.
I'm not applying it to the rest of the world, but I have no reason to believe that a nation could not design its immigration system like America has.
Sounds like a globalist to me.
Yeah, I am a globalist. Yes, I am a global. I don't know if you
So
realize.
you're
Yeah,
taking
but I am
an
a globalist.
American concept
But
and
I'm
applying it to
saying,
the
yeah,
rest
I'm
of the
saying
world.
that this is a good immigration system, and if other countries did it as well, that it could be beneficial with some certain changes. I don't think American immigration system is perfect. I think we need more election judges. I think we need like more funding for certain programs when it comes to immigration. But I am saying that immigration is so economically beneficial that any country completely saying, like Japan or other countries, say like fuck it all, it's only going to kneecap you, as it has Japan, as it has countries like
Japan is changing in that regard. Japan is becoming much more open to the idea of immigration as well.
Hey, great. Thank you. I'm trying to be
You
nice
asked me
here.
a
Just
question.
talk.
Like I'm just okay, whatever.
Great. I asked for a response, not an essay. Thank you. I wanted to a little bit of a contention from me is so you're saying, well, there is an identity in Poland. Would you say that a Polish identity would be, you know, in the city design and the culture, would it be strong?
Please don't tell me this person is from Poland. I beg. Poland is not a northern country. I beg, please don't tell me this person is from Poland. That would be so bad.
Stronger 40 years ago than it is now?
40 in the city design and culture. No, I don't think it's when you say stronger. I think you mean like it's like more Polish.
more
It's like
emphasized, more
emphasized
Polish.
No, but for my time there, I thought it was quite pretty. I could tell very easily that it was Poland. Everybody
Yeah.
spoke Polish. Very few actually spoke English. Poland is part of the EU, but it is, I think, very well protected. Its culture and even its religious traditions, which a lot of them I don't
Yeah,
agree
and it
with.
gets sanctioned by the EU and oppressed because of it.
It's not.
Yeah, it is sanctioned. It is sanctioned because it created, because of its horrible situation with judges. I will explain it now. The government created a whole sort of commission that would punish judges for bad rulings, which and it also implanted its own judges, okay? To which European Union, rightfully so, said, this is unconstitutional, we're gonna fine you. What else? There were a few other things that Poland is being fined for by the EU. This is not oppression. Like, the EU is basically saying, hey, Poland, you're moving further away from democracy. Can you stop doing that? And Poland is saying, no.
Getting oppressed because it's defended its cultural values. It's getting quote-unquote reactions for treating immigrants and refugees so shittily, like they let many of them freeze on the border.
True, Dylan. Amazing. I am going to take this fragment because this is, Dylan is talking about immigrants on the Belarusian border. Not just freeze, die. And not just freeze because paramedics were forbidden from coming to the border. People were forbidden from giving the immigrants food. It was a really horrible situation, and I'm really happy to see Dylan Burns call it out. This is great.
Great. The refugees is another topic. I don't think we have the time
Angela
for
should have
that.
doubled the amount of refugees.
True. It's true.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, guys,
Pressure
I'm
more
sorry, we gotta
immigration.
cut it off. I understand there's not really a good point to cut off a debate, but we do have a time limit here that I want to keep us under. We got a bunch of callers in the back line, so I do want to get to closing statements. This was a good debate. I think you guys they really picked up towards
I
the end here.
am so happy that Dylan mentioned this. Wow. Dylan is not only good on the topic of Ukraine, Dylan is also good on the topic of Poland. Really nice to see.
Here, but we gotta get to closers. Like I said, we agreed in the background that Joker would go first for the closer, and then Dylan would have the last word. So, Joker, whenever you're ready, you got
Alright.
7 minutes on the clock for closing statement.
Thank you, Ben. God, I'm just so disappointed that this. I was just getting started, Dylan. Really, thank you for breaching my virginity, as they say. The debate virginity. I would love to talk to you more about this with you. Really, I didn't even get through half of the notes because we just so bogged down into the details of what.
You haven't said anything. You haven't made a point this whole debate. Was this is really a debate? I mean, maybe it's your first time, but
Is globalism and how globalism is just two countries talking to each other, which I still do not agree. When you hear the word globalism, you have a sort of a different idea than just countries enjoying themselves and just having a trade agreement and
enjoying
globalism
countries.
is the word.
Countries enjoying themselves. What does that mean? Countries enjoying themselves.
Globe is in the globalism. That means there's a lot going on, the big globe, right? So I do believe we've come to sort of an agreement that the parts that I do not really agree with what globalism is good for the world, and the crimes of globalism are very bad. We can agree with that. Um, I would like to say that I still do believe that, well, everybody knew there's nothing going to be learned in this debate. I do believe that still nationalism is the way to go. If we have a strong, not bullied countries able to stand for their own, and not be bullied around by superseding ultra country organizations such as the UN, EU, HO, Omega Lol, whatever, right? And really, I do believe Dylan has been a little bit disingenuous here, because I think he loves globalism. Nationalism. He loves nationalism as it pertains to Ukraine. Because in my opener, we never really got to it. Nationalism is very strong in the Ukraine, and
his foreign policy is amazing. He's kind of a lib, but he seems to have a very good grasp of global politics. True. He's very good on Poland, very good on Ukraine. That's why we should talk.
He wants to pretend to be a war journalist or whatever. So I'm sure he saw it firsthand how strongly the people of Ukraine believe in their national sovereignty and their culture, and they do not want. So in this case, Russia is bad, right? What if it was America that they were fighting? What if America, just because Dylan is living in America and he has an American mindset, Russia is bad? What if it was the other way around? What if America
what?
Compete on Ukrainian culture and assimilate Ukraine into their fold and change their language and change their culture to American?
How would US do that?
Well, actually, that's kind of what's happening. So if it's Russia,
it's happening? Ukrainian is becoming English?
it's bad. If it's America, it's good, is what I'm getting here. Nationalism in Ukraine is very beneficial, and actually it is one of the modern examples of how nationalism is a force for good. As really, these guys are not fighting for globalism. They're fighting for their own country. They're fighting for their own nation. They're fighting for their own culture, their own traditions, their own language, and everything that encompasses nationalism, right? So I still don't understand what good has globalism really done to the world. I still don't get it. Maybe Dylan has something to say.
All right, thank you for that closing statement there. Dylan, you got 7 minutes on the clock whenever you're ready.
So, this is the second time you said it. If you think that I'm not a war journalist, whatever, when I come back to Europe in a month, you can come with me. We can get you a press pass, and I will bring you to Kharkiv, personally. Come with me, okay? Send me a DM. Look it up anytime. You can see what I do over there, okay?
Wait. Can I get a press conference from Dylan? Can I go to Kharkiv with him? Wait, hold on. Don't take Joker Society, take me. Wait, hold on. I could get a press pass. Hold on a moment. I wanna do what you do. I wanna see what you do there. Interesting. That could be uninteresting. I hope to see some materials he filmed in Lublin. True. Like Lublin, the place from Unia Lubelska, right? Lublin, Unia Lubelska.
That'd be pretty based, actually.
Yeah, send me a DM.
I think there's a placard of the Unia Lubelska there, right?
Absolutely. But when it comes to...
So welcome, Bartosz. Welcome to the stream.
The idea of like Ukraine, for example. I, in this conversation, have never said that in no cases ever is nationalism bad. In fact, I even said during this debate, I believe there is a good reason for Ukrainians to want to preserve their language. And I even said that would be fine in Poland and other countries as well. I think that's absolutely fine. It's how you preserve your language. Do you preserve it by trying to cut off your country from the world and not accepting the immigrants, or by funding programs that make sure that people are taught your language if they're living in your country, which is something that I'm more in favor of. So again, nationalism as a tool of
immigration has never caused historically just a country, like a language, to be phased out. That's not what's happening. Oh, there's a monument. Nice. Like, it's nice to see, Bartosz, by the way, that Ukrainian, like, you can see the solidarity between Ukraine and Poland for it, the shared history when the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth existed, like, that wasn't a nation state, it was not Poland, it was a union of many peoples, and it was nice, you know?
Liberation from another country's oppression, I think it's perfectly fine. Another movement that I would support is the Kurdish movement for a state.
And the interesting part about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, that many languages, like 40 languages functioned within the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. No problem. It was not a problem. Trust. 40 languages functioned in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And it was all fine.
Which is inherently like a nationalist movement, because nationalism is the hardcore like belief in this nation state, belief in your people, and you be ethically nationalist, stuff like that. That can't.
And don't be trapped by the Polish government into believing that it was just Poland. It was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It was a far more interesting country than what is being told by some.
I'm not saying the nation state cannot exist in a globalized world. And at no point in this conversation did I say we should abolish the nation state. I did say that nation states might be like a sandcastle when engaging with the ocean of globalism.
I would say that, for example, like the idea of a composite state feels a lot more appealing to me than a nation state, but that's just me.
Might be torn down and might stay, who knows, maybe it'll become a more permanent structure. Globalism has been around a lot longer than nationalism has.
True.
And that's why I believe in globalism, because it is a time-tested, successful method to bring civilizations to new heights scientifically, economically, and educationally. Like,
Dylan is spitting facts.
Measure a society to be successful. Globalism is useful in reaching that societal success. As for these things you said about all these international organizations being useless, I've already expressed that I multiple examples where I think these interventions have been useful, especially the UN, because I want to give the UN as much credit as possible. After knowing and speaking with and working with so many people in the UN, I want to make sure that they get their fair due. And again, when we talk about America's crazy control of the UN, he's basing this off of money we sent to the UN that makes up 1/4 of the police budget in New York for these UN military missions with jeeps and tanks and guns, right? Compare that to the $2 trillion we spent on Afghanistan. That's $1.5 billion a year in 2021. That's not enough to corrupt the institution to worthlessness and American greed. That's why every single time they have a vote on Israel, the vast majority of nations vote to condemn Israeli settlements in the West Bank, even if there's a few who join the United States in supporting Israel. That's because America doesn't have complete control of the UN. That's why the UN didn't endorse the mission to invade Iraq, but did endorse the mission to liberate Kuwait, because China and Russia didn't have a problem with that, so they didn't veto it. Anyway, I think I've made most of my points succinct and clear, and yeah, I guess that's that. You cannot stop the unstoppable tide of globalism. To fight it is to fight against the current in the ocean. You will drown.
All right, thank you for that closing statement there, guys. So here at the Crucible, we do things a little bit differently. No Andrew impression this time. Sorry, chat. We do things a little bit differently here at the Crucible. After the closing statements are done, we consider the debate to be over. At that point, moderator can interact. We're going to have some callers. We're going to have some super chat questions. There's still going to be some back and forth, but we consider the debate portion of the stream to actually be over. But thank you guys for that interaction. I think it really picked up at the end, like I said.
Okay, I'm going to go